The chilly October morning of 2004 began with an unusual disturbance on Main Street in the town of Silverton, Oregon. 6 unmarked Oregon State Police vehicles quietly pulled up in front of the 2-story red brick building, the headquarters of the Silverton Police Department. Neighbors around the square peeked through their curtains as officers in tactical gear took positions around the area, preparing to execute an arrest warrant that was rare in the town's history. Inside, Michael Langford, the 49-year-old respected police chief, who had served nearly 30 years in the force and was the son of a legendary former officer, was brewing his morning coffee, a habit he had never missed in 2 decades. At exactly 9:47 a.m., there was a sharp knock at the door. "Michael Langford, Oregon State Police. We have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the 1959 disappearance of Evelyn Langford." The officers later described how his hand trembled slightly as he set down his coffee cup, but his face remained strangely calm, as if he had always known this moment would come, sooner or later. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. In Oregon in 1959, autumn arrived early with a cold mist blanketing the fields south of the Willamette Valley. The town of Silverton nestled between low hills and ancient stands of Douglas fir, where life moved slowly and everyone knew each other's face on every street. The population was under 6,000, most working on farms, in lumber mills, or small factories along the main road. Social order was maintained by absolute trust in the local police, in the law, and in traditional family values. In that peaceful picture, the Langford family was one of the most respected names. Jack Langford, 36, a calm and reserved native Oregonian who served as a town police officer. Evelyn, or Evie, as everyone called her, 29, an elementary school teacher at Silverton Elementary, gentle, thoughtful, and beloved by her students. They lived in a 2-story wooden house on the eastern edge of town, where a narrow road led down to Silver Creek Lake. Thursday, October 15th, the weather was clear, and school let out at exactly 4 o'clock. Evie left the building carrying her purse, waved goodbye to colleagues, and walked home as usual. A woman working at the grocery store near the corner saw her cross Main Street and stopped to buy the evening paper. That was the last time anyone saw Evie. Around 7 p.m., the neighbor across the street noticed the Langford's living room light flick on briefly, then off. No one saw anyone come or go after that. That night, wind from the Abaca forest blew through the neighborhood, carrying the damp smell of decaying leaves and lake water. There were no unusual sounds, no signs of anything out of the ordinary, except the prolonged silence. The next morning, Evie's classroom remained empty, the chalk untouched on the board, her purse still in the cabinet. The principal called the house, but no one answered. By noon, 2 colleagues stopped by, knocked repeatedly, but got no response. The door was locked, curtains drawn, Evie's car still in the garage. The Langford family began searching the neighborhood, asking neighbors, checking along the road to the lake. No one had seen any trace of her. There was no clue as to where she might have gone. As dusk fell, Jack Langford finally picked up the phone, his voice hoarse with worry, and reported that his wife had vanished. The call was logged at the sheriff's office by Harold Keene at 6:42 p.m. on October 16, 1959. The caller was Jack Langford, an officer with the Silverton Police Department, reporting that his wife Evelyn Langford had been missing since the previous evening. Keene, who had served in law enforcement for more than 20 years, took the information, made brief notes in the duty log, and ordered a temporary case file opened under number 59 and 122. The incident was initially classified as a missing person with no clear criminal element. 2 patrol deputies, Wallace and Moore, were dispatched to the scene for preliminary verification. When they arrived, the Langfords' 2-story house sat quiet beneath the shade of maple trees, the late afternoon light turning copper. Jack Langford was on the porch, still in his police uniform, looking exhausted and tense. He let them in and briefly explained that he hadn't seen Evie since the previous evening when she returned home from school. Wallace noted the last time Jack said he saw his wife around 7 p.m. Inside, Everything was in order, the sofa neatly made, windows locked. Living room lights off. There were no signs of forced entry or a struggle. The kitchen was tidy, a half-finished glass of water on the dining table. The tablecloth folded perfectly flat. Deputy Moore checked the back door and confirmed the inside latch was still engaged. The upstairs bedroom was neat, closet closed, no luggage missing. In the small ground-floor office, Evie's personal files, books and papers were stacked neatly. Wallace asked Jack about his wife's routines, social contacts when she usually came home, and whether she had any recent plans to go anywhere. Jack said Evie rarely traveled, that aside from school and occasional weekend shopping, she was almost always at home. He added that the previous evening she had eaten dinner early and gone upstairs to read. When he left for night patrol, she was still home. He returned near midnight and didn't see her in the bedroom. He thought she might have gone to a friend's house or taken a walk around the lake, as she sometimes did. But she still hadn't returned by morning. Wallace recorded the entire statement and asked about personal belongings, purse, watch, car, documents. Jack confirmed nothing was missing and all house keys were accounted for. The patrol team finished checking the perimeter and confirmed the windows, front door, and back door showed no signs of break-in. Moore used a flashlight to examine the path to the garage and the fence line. No strange footprints or drag marks. The grass was wet from overnight dew, but undisturbed. Wallace radioed the office to report the scene secure, with no obvious evidence of a crime. Keene instructed them to photograph the exterior of the house and file an initial report. By 8:10 p.m., Case 59M122 was entered into the Marion County storage system with the notation, female age 29, missing since previous night, last seen at residence, no signs of forced entry. The preliminary report was signed by Deputy Wallace and approved by Keene. Per procedure, the case remained at administrative investigation level for 24 hours to gather additional witness data and check the victim's movements. Before leaving the scene, Keene told the patrol team to return the next morning to search the Silver Creek Lake area and the route from the school to the Langford home. Inside the house, a heavy atmosphere lingered. Jack Langford sat silently at the kitchen table, hands clasped, staring blankly into the darkening yard. On the porch, the yellow light cast shadows on the empty walkway as the patrol team packed up their gear, wrote the final lines of their report, and left the quiet street. Case number 59M122 was hastily scribbled into the duty log, closing a long night with no answers. On the morning of October 17, 1959, the file was officially upgraded to active investigation status. Sheriff Harold Keene convened a short meeting at the Marion County office and assigned teams to verify information throughout Silverton and surrounding areas. Deputies Wallace and Moore were tasked with checking the bus depot and train station, while another team was sent to hospitals and small hotels along Main Street. At the Silverton bus depot, the ticket clerk confirmed no passenger named Evelyn Langford had departed in the past 2 days. The ticket log showed no matching names, and no lone woman matching the description had boarded. The Oregon Electric Station in Salem was contacted with the same result. No one matching the description had been seen. The local hospital had no admissions matching the time frame and gender, and no accident reports in the county. By midday, Keene and Deputy Moore checked small motels around the town center that typically housed travelers or temporary workers. The owner of the Lakeview Inn confirmed the guest list for the nights of the 15th and 16th contained no matching name or person. At the Maple Motel, the desk clerk recalled a young woman checking in on the evening of the 15th but leaving the next morning. Neither appearance nor signature matched. Police collected the register, compared it, and ruled it unrelated. In the afternoon, Keene expanded verification to residences near the Langford home. 11 households within a 2-block radius were interviewed. Most knew the Langfords, but heard nothing unusual on the night of the 15th beyond strong wind. One witness, Mrs. Mildred Hart, who lived across the street, stated that around 7:30 p.m., she heard a door slam loudly from the Langford house, then a few minutes later saw the living room light go out. She assumed Jack was leaving for night duty, as his patrol car remained parked at the curb until nearly 9 before driving off. This statement was recorded and cross-checked with Jack's duty roster. Another neighbor, Mr. Raymond Dyer, reported hearing a faint metallic sound between 8 o'clock and 9 p.m. like a garage door opening or closing, but couldn't be certain. No one saw anyone leave the house or noticed unfamiliar vehicles nearby. Keene ordered the technical team to examine tire tracks in front of the Langford house, but only the homeowner's vehicle marks were found. At the same time, Deputy Wallace visited Silverton Elementary to gather information from Evie's colleagues. The principal said she was always punctual and had never missed work without notice. A fellow third-grade teacher, Mrs. Helen Rowe, said Evie showed no signs of worry or anything unusual on her last day. She only mentioned planning to revise lesson plans that evening and submit them the next morning. Mrs. Rowe confirmed Evie never mentioned traveling or meeting anyone. Evie's third-grade students were briefly questioned, but provided no useful information. By the end of the day, police had checked every hotel, bus and train station, hospital, and interviewed more than 20 witnesses. No one had seen Evie after the afternoon of October 15th. No financial transactions or phone calls were recorded after her disappearance. Keene wrote in his log, "No indication of voluntary departure, no evidence of violence or break-in, whereabouts unknown." The report was sent to the county office at 7:30 p.m., recommending continued verification around the lake and nearby roads the following day. In Case File 59M122, the final note for October 17th read simply, "Subject, unaccounted for. Last seen entering residence, no departure confirmed." The office fell silent, broken only by the sound of Keene's pen closing another day of investigation that led nowhere. On the morning of October 18th, 1959, Sheriff Harold Keene signed the order for a wide-area search around Silverton and adjacent regions. A detailed plan was drawn up within 2 hours. The search area covered the route from the elementary school, where Evelyn Langford taught, to her home, the shores of Silver Creek Lake, and the southern edge of the Abiqua Forest. The department mobilized 8 officers, 3 patrol vehicles, a K-9 unit from Marion County, and more than 30 local volunteers. At 9 a.m., everyone assembled in the Silverton Elementary sports field for briefing, area assignments, and maps. The first team, led by Deputy Wallace, covered the main road from the school to the Maple Drive neighborhood. The second team, led by Deputy Moore, searched around Silver Creek Lake. The third team of volunteers, coordinated by Reserve Officer Larkin, swept trails in the Abiqua Forest. The sky was overcast, temperature low, thick fog, limiting visibility. At 10 a.m., the groups moved out with radios and zone maps. At Silver Creek Lake, the water was calm, maple leaves floating on the surface. Canine dogs were given Evie's scent from items taken from the house, a handkerchief and coat, and began tracking along the water's edge. Searchers used poles to probe the shore, checking bushes and paths down to the lake. No personal items were found. Near noon, Moore's team moved to the western shore near an old dam trail, but only old fishermen's footprints were visible. Wallace reported from Maple Drive, no new witnesses, only one person recalling seeing a figure walking in the rain the previous week, but unidentified. In the Abiqua Forest, Larkin's team struggled with steep, wet terrain and dense trees. They marked searched areas with white paint on trunks, but by afternoon found nothing. One section was extended 2 miles south, revealing only scattered trash and old lumber truck tracks. By 4 p.m., the teams returned to the rally point and reported results. Keene compiled the findings and ordered Phase 2 to continue the next day, focusing on Silver Creek Lake, where Evie was known to walk. On the morning of October 19th, divers from the Salem Rescue Unit were brought in. 3 divers surveyed deep water near the western shore, negative results. The lake was clear, the bottom covered in thick mud, no foreign objects. Simultaneously, patrol teams used metal detectors along the shore for jewelry, keys, or small metal items, but no unusual signals registered. In the eastern residential area, Keene had officers go door to door, asking residents to check sheds, backyards, dry wells, or barns for any trace. All reports came back empty. At noon on October 20th, as the search entered its third day, weather worsened and light rain began. Diving was suspended due to high wind. At 2:30 p.m., Keene gathered everyone for reassessment. In 3 days, over 17 square miles had been searched. No footwear impressions, clothing, or personal items belonging to Evelyn Langford. The dogs lost the scent trail near the lake and couldn't pick up a direction. Reports were sent to the county office and added to file 59-122 with the note, "Extensive ground search conducted, no trace located." That afternoon, Keene decided to end the initial search phase, keeping police on standby for new leads. Volunteers were released, equipment returned. As night fell, missing person posters remained posted along Main Street, showing Evelyn in her work dress, gentle smile, and softly curled hair. The whole town was quiet, and in Sheriff Harold Keene's small office, case file 59-122 was placed on the shelf, marking the completion of the first phase of the search. On October 21, 1959, after the official search was suspended, Sheriff Harold Keene summoned Jack Langford to the office for a detailed second interview. The interrogation began at 9 a.m., fully recorded and transcribed into file 59-122. Jack arrived on time, in uniform, looking tired but cooperative. Keene had him sit at the long table, with Deputy Wallace acting as recording secretary. The first questions focused on the evening of October 15th, the last time Evie was seen. Jack stated that after dinner around 6:30 p.m., Evie went upstairs to read, while he reviewed work documents downstairs. At 7:15 p.m., he received a call from the station needing assistance on Southern Patrol, so he changed into uniform and left in the patrol car. Keene pressed for the exact departure time. Jack confirmed 7:25 p.m. He said he couldn't recall if Evie was still awake, only that he heard the radio playing softly upstairs. When he returned at 11:45 p.m., the lights were off, the house quiet. He assumed his wife was asleep, so he showered and slept on the living room couch to wake early. At 6 a.m. the next day, Evie was gone, the front door locked, the bed unused. He thought she might have gone for a walk, but when she hadn't returned by noon, he called neighbors and then police. Keene asked for the exact duty log from that night. Station records confirmed Jack signed in for a shift from 8 p.m. to midnight. But no witness placed him in his assigned sector. Wallace cross-checked the patrol log. Only one radio check-in at 9:10 p.m., saying, "All clear." When asked, Jack explained radio reception might have been poor. He had driven around the outskirts checking streetlights and returned home later than usual. Keene noted, discrepancy in timeline, subject unspecific about patrol location. Next, he asked about Evie's habits and whether there had been any recent marital issues. Jack said their marriage was stable, they rarely argued, and while Evie sometimes felt stressed from work, she showed no signs of wanting to leave. Keene asked if she had close friends or another man he knew of. Jack denied it, saying Evie was private and spent most of her time at school or home. When asked about personal firearms, Jack confirmed he owned a Smith & Wesson .38, kept in a locked cabinet in his office, missing for about 2 weeks. He said he had searched, but hadn't reported it, thinking it might be at the station or in his car. Keene added the note and instructed Wallace to check the department armory. While Jack signed the first page, Keene noticed a small scratch on the knuckle of his right hand. When asked, Jack said it happened while changing a tire the previous week. Wallace photographed and documented it. Keene then asked for more details about the night before Evie vanished. Any phone calls or visitors? Jack recalled only a short work-related call about the schedule. No one visited. When asked the last time he spoke to Evie, Jack said around 6:40 p.m., when she called down from upstairs, "Don't forget your jacket." He spoke evenly, without emotion, occasionally pausing to breathe deeply. Keene observed his demeanor, no obvious signs of lying, but noted a lack of emotion given the circumstances. The interview lasted until noon, totaling 48 questions. Before ending, Keene asked if Jack thought Evie left voluntarily. Jack replied, "No, she would never do that." He stressed she had no reason to leave, no debts, no distant relatives. When asked why he didn't report her missing immediately the next morning, Jack said he thought she might have gone to a friend's and would return late. He didn't want to make a fuss. The transcript noted, "Subject cooperative, no admission. Inconsistencies in timing remain." After Jack left, Keene and Wallace reviewed the statement against witness accounts. The 7:25 p.m. departure matched Mrs. Mildred Hart's report of a slamming door and lights going out. However, his 11:45 p.m. return had no corroboration. The final report for the day flagged the minor injury, timing discrepancies, and missing handgun as points to monitor. Keene filed it under primary interview, subject spouse, signed it, and changed the status to pending further inquiry. In storage, the 11-page transcript was stapled into the middle of file 59M122, marking the end of the husband's interrogation phase with no criminal element yet established. On October 23, 1959, after reviewing the complete witness statements and search results, Sheriff Harold Keene submitted a request to the Marion County District Court for a search warrant of the Langford residence on the grounds of continued investigation into a disappearance with suspicious circumstances. The warrant was signed and approved that same morning. At 13:15, Keene, accompanied by officers Wallace and Moore, returned to the property carrying a Polaroid camera, evidence bags, and a sample collection kit. Jack Langford was present and stated he was ready to cooperate. Per procedure, Keene read the warrant aloud and asked Jack to sign acknowledgement of consent to proceed. Starting on the ground floor, they documented the condition of the furnishings and photographed every room. The living room was tidy, the floor clean, dust evenly settled, no signs of disturbance. The kitchen was orderly, all items in their proper places, no broken objects. Wallace collected dust samples from the floor and examined the wall near the back door. No evidence of forced entry was found. They then moved to the second-floor bedroom. The bed was neatly made, the closet fully stocked, drawers organized, and Evie's jewelry box still contained her necklace and wedding ring, nothing missing. On the dressing table sat an uncapped bottle of perfume and an open book with a bookmark. Keene marked the page and photographed it. Jack's office, located on the ground floor behind the kitchen, contained a locked safe whose contents were only documents and a spare-duty revolver issued by the department. Wallace noted the lock appeared undisturbed. While examining the door leading to the basement, Keene noticed the hinges were new, the paint color slightly different from the surrounding wood frame. He asked Jack about recent repairs. Jack replied that he had repainted the basement 2 weeks earlier because of damp had appeared on the walls. Keene wrote, "Fresh paint. Confirmed date of renovation." They switched on the light and descended the wooden stairs. The air was cold, the single bulb casting weak light on walls painted light gray. Every wall surface and the concrete floor showed fresh paint. The smell was still strong. Wallace used a flashlight to inspect the corners and noticed uneven shiny streaks along the baseboards, as if the area had been vigorously scrubbed with a cleaning agent. He scraped a small sample with a razor blade and sealed it in an evidence bag. Keene ordered full photographic documentation of the basement with numbered markers, especially the east wall where paint overlapped. On a wooden shelf against the wall sat a paint can, brushes, and several old rags. Moore noted a slightly damp, dark green cloth rag inside a metal bucket. That item was also sealed. When they inspected the floor drain, the cover was unusually clean, its surface shiny as if recently wiped. Keene wrote in his notebook, "No debris, possibly cleaned recently." He asked Jack how often the basement was used. Jack said only for storage and that he rarely went down there. During the examination, Wallace discovered a faint curved scratch on the concrete floor, approximately 40 centimeters from the east wall, and nearly 1 meter long, consistent with something heavy being dragged. They measured and photographed it, but could not determine its origin. A thorough check of the entire area revealed no blood or clear footprints. Keene had the lights turned off and used a UV lamp. No fluorescence was observed. After completing the photography, the team moved to the backyard. The soil was soft from recent rain, with a few slight depressions, but nothing distinguishable from the surrounding area. Wallace took 3 soil samples for comparison. All items, paint scrapings, the rag, dust, and soil, were labeled, sealed, and placed in evidence bags. The search lasted nearly 4 hours. At 17:30, Keene prepared the closing report, signed by himself and both deputies. The report stated, "Interior examined, fresh paint observed in basement, no forced entry, no biological evidence visible." As the team left, Jack Langford stood on the porch steps, hands in his pockets, saying nothing. On the drive back to the office, Keene flipped through his notebook and stared at the line he had just written. "Basement freshly painted, need to verify exact date and chemical composition of paint." He said nothing to the others, but in his mind, a suspicion had already formed that the quietest part of that house had once contained something that someone had deliberately tried to erase. In the county evidence locker, sealed bags numbered 1 through 8 were placed in storage alongside copies of the Polaroid photographs, closing the official search, whose recorded result was no clear criminal evidence discovered. On October 25, 1959, after preliminary analysis of the samples collected from the Langford residence, Sheriff Harold Keene ordered the search perimeter around Silver Creek expanded by an additional 2 miles. The decision was based on neighbor interviews describing Evelyn Langford's habit of taking evening walks, and the fact that the distance from her home to the north shore of the lake was just over half a mile. At 8 a.m., a search party consisting of 6 deputies and 13 volunteers assembled at the flag point where the previous operation had ended. They divided into 3 teams. The first, led by Deputy Wallace, swept the west bank. The second, led by Moore, covered the east bank. The third, from the Marion County Rescue Unit, searched the old dam area to the south. The weather was cold. Thick fog hung over the lake, and the water lay still like glass, reflecting the turning maple trees. Each team carried long poles, flashlights, evidence bags, and Polaroid cameras. At 9:20 a.m., Wallace's group began probing along the narrow trail that ran from the Maple Drive neighborhood down to the lake, the path Evie was known to take. They pushed the poles through tall grass and examined every stone step along the shore. Just before 10 a.m., the volunteer Howard Green spotted an object in thick grass, approximately 3 meters from the water's edge. It was a light brown woman's leather glove, wet and caked with mud. Wallace, wearing protective gloves, picked it up, noted its small size suitable for a woman's hand, and the hand-stitched edging, then sealed it in an evidence bag labeled "Evidence Item." He recorded the GPS coordinates on the map. After radioing the find, Keene left his office and drove to the scene. By the time he arrived, Wallace had cordoned off the area. The team photographed the entire scene, including surrounding traces. No other items were found within a 3-square-meter radius, only faint grass indentations. Keene ordered the search radius expanded to 20 meters, following prevailing wind and water flow directions. Moore's team on the opposite shore had deputies wade along the edge using metal detectors, but reported nothing significant. Near the glove, Wallace noticed a small yellow piece of paper stuck in the mud, with blurred ink marks. He retrieved it with tweezers and placed it in a separate preservation bag. The paper was almost illegible. Only a few scattered characters remained readable. Keene ordered the surrounding mud collected for comparison. At 11:45 a.m., the teams paused to catalog evidence. The leather glove, paper fragment, and 4 mud samples were numbered, sealed, and signed by 3 witnesses. Simultaneously, The rescue unit on the South Shore reported finding a thin beige fabric scrap floating near the old dam, approximately 10 centimeters long and covered in algae. The fabric was retrieved, placed on nylon sheeting, photographed, and sealed as evidence. Item 13. Fiber analysis indicated cotton-wool blend, likely from women's clothing. Kane ordered all items transferred to the Marion County Forensic Laboratory for examination. In the interim report submitted that afternoon, he wrote female personal item recovered near Silver Creek Shore, possible connection to missing person case 59 M122. After securing the scene, Kane and Wallace returned to the Langford residence to verify whether Evie owned similar gloves. Inside her closet, they found a pair of brown leather gloves, but only one remained. The mate was missing. Jack Langford confirmed his wife had lost one glove several weeks earlier, believing she had left it somewhere. Kane photographed the remaining glove for comparison and took it as a reference sample for stitching and leather. He made no comment, only writing in his notebook, "Matching glove found." At 17 o'clock, Kane returned to the office and met with the photo technician to develop and number all field photographs. The images showed mud concentrated on the glove's cuff and outer edge, indicating it had partially been submerged. The lakeside mud consistency matched samples taken from the Langford basement, a detail noted for laboratory comparison. The following day, the official forensic report arrived. No blood was detected on the fabric scrap or glove, but a 5-centimeter strand of light blonde hair was adhered inside the glove. Under microscope, the hair structure was consistent with natural European-type blonde hair, untreated. The hair sample was preserved in cold storage for further testing. Kane immediately updated the case file, changing the classification from missing person to suspicious disappearance. All evidence was placed in Box 2 of File 59M122, sealed with signatures from Kane, Wallace, and the forensic technician. In his end-of-day report, Kane wrote, "Initial physical evidence recovered. Location aligns with subject's usual walking route. Case classification revised accordingly." In Silverton, word of the discovery of women's items spread quickly by word of mouth, turning the town's quiet atmosphere heavy. Kane released no details, only confirming to the local paper that the investigation was expanding in a new direction. In his small office, he studied the map of Silver Creek spread on his desk. Red pins marking search zones now formed a ring around the shore, as if closing the final path Evelyn Langford had ever walked. On October 27, 1959, the Marion County Forensic Laboratory completed its initial examination of evidence recovered from Silver Creek. The report reached Sheriff Harold Kane's office at 10 a.m. and consisted of 3 main sections: the leather glove, the fabric scrap, and accompanying mud samples. Findings stated, genuine leather, with cotton thread stitching, matching gloves produced by local Jensen's Apparel, where Evelyn Langford was a known customer. The glove contained light blonde hair, whose cuticle pattern matched prior description, though positive identification was impossible without DNA technology available at the time. Mud samples contained no blood, only high iron and organic content typical of Silver Creek. The beige fabric was confirmed as cotton-wool blend, cut from the lower hem of a woman's coat. The longitudinal fibers followed the seam line, indicating it had been torn by force rather than natural decay. Kane studied the enlarged photographs closely, then instructed Wallace to return to the scene and re-sweep a 20-meter radius around the glove find, paying special attention to possible metal objects or spent cartridges. The following morning, the patrol team returned to the lake with a metal detector borrowed from Salem. The device was moved slowly along the west bank, where the terrain was gentle and mud-deep. At 11:10 a.m., it registered a strong signal near a fallen tree, approximately 6 meters from the glove location. Wallace and Moore dug through a thin layer of mud and uncovered a small cylindrical metal object coated in black sludge. After preliminary cleaning, they identified it as a .38 cartridge casing with clear head stamp WCC 38 SPL. The casing was placed in a plastic evidence box labeled Evidence Item 14 and noted found near creek, shallow layer, same vector as glove. Keene, notified while in his office, immediately ordered the area sealed and fully photographed. That afternoon, the item was delivered to the forensic lab with detailed chain of custody documentation specifying coordinates and depth. Ballistics analysis was completed on October 29th. The casing was undeformed, and rifling marks were consistent with a Smith & Wesson .38 special revolver, the exact model issued by the Silverton Police Department to its officers, including Jack Langford. A check of the department armory registry confirmed Jack had been assigned serial number 213784, but had never filed an official loss report. Keene added to file 59 M122, recovered cartridge casing .38 SPL matches weapon type, registered to subject's husband. He requested test firing comparison with department ammunition. The subsequent report indicated an 85% plus probability the casing had been fired from a Smith & Wesson of the same production batch as Jack's registered weapon. Although the exact gun could not be confirmed, the caliber and manufacturer match raised significant suspicion. Keene re-examined statements. Jack claimed he lost the revolver about 2 weeks earlier, the same period he said he repainted the basement. That timeline was underlined in red in Keene's notebook. He summoned Wallace and ordered all new evidence placed in Box 3 with field photographs, and he prohibited any press disclosure. That same day, Keene issued an internal memo assigning Moore to secure the lake area for an additional 48 hours. In his small Marion County office, Keene reviewed the sequence of photographs, the glove lying sideways in mud, the torn fabric, then the casing beside the fallen tree, all within a few meters of one another. He wrote no conclusion, only taped the 3 images side by side on the evidence board and circled them in red. At 18 o'clock, he submitted a supplemental report formally reclassifying the case from missing person to suspicious disappearance. Physical evidence recovered possibly linked to firearm use. In the forensic storage, the leather glove, fabric scrap, and .38 casing rested together on a numbered tray, sealed and logged under code 59 M122. Technicians added the note, "No blood detected, metallic residue consistent with firearm discharge." When the report copy reached Keene's desk, he simply nodded, folded it, and placed it in the ever-thickening file where, for the first time, details had emerged, suggesting Evelyn Langford's disappearance was no longer simply a woman vanishing without a trace. On October 30th, 1959, following the ballistics report confirming the Silver Creek casing matched the Smith & Wesson .38 Special Series, Sheriff Harold Keene summoned Jack Langford to the office to clarify information regarding his service weapon. The interview was recorded and added as a supplement to Case 59 M122. When questioned, Jack confirmed he had been issued revolver serial 213784, but stated it had been lost a few weeks ago, possibly while cleaning the house or left at the station. Keene asked whether he had reported the loss to superiors. Jack replied, no, explaining he thought he would find it and did not want administrative trouble. Keene maintained a calm tone and directed Wallace to pull issuance records and internal logs. Results confirmed no report of loss or replacement request existed, and the most recent armory inventory on October 8 showed no shortages. When confronted, Jack was silent for several seconds, then suggested he might have misremembered the serial number or exact timing. Wallace cross-referenced the duty weapon sign-out log, confirming revolver 213784 had been assigned to Langford since 1957, with no return or damage notation. All data was printed and attached to the file. Keene asked Jack to describe the exact circumstances of discovering the weapon missing. Jack said the last time he saw it was in the office safe early October while reviewing paperwork. Afterward, while repainting the basement, he moved items temporarily and likely misplaced it during cleanup. Keene asked whether anyone else had entered the house during that period. Jack answered no. Only Evie had been home. The transcript noted, subject states firearm misplaced within residence, no external witnesses. Keene had Wallace press about the new safe lock and fresh basement paint. Jack maintained it was only due to damp walls and unrelated. When asked why he never reported the loss of an official duty weapon, Jack appeared flustered and repeated he believed it was temporary and he would recover it. Keene observed no obvious signs of deception, but found the explanation unconvincing. He instructed Wallace to forward copies of the interview and inventory records to Internal Affairs for confirmation of non-reporting. Later that day, verification arrived. No record of a lost firearm existed anywhere in the system, and all other weapons were accounted for. Keene annotated the file, discrepancy verified, no administrative record of firearm loss. Simultaneously, he compared Jack's stated loss timeline with the estimated casing discharge window, slightly over 2 weeks apart. The glove, fabric, and casing had all been recovered in the area Evie routinely walked, making the coincidence noteworthy. However, by regulation, Keene could not charge without stronger evidence and kept the investigation open. He called Wallace in and ordered that from now on, every contact with Jack Langford be recorded and reported directly to him. In the internal memo, Keene wrote, "Subject's missing weapon coincides with caliber and class of recovered casing, maintain surveillance, no charges at this time." That afternoon, Keene reread Jack's original October statement, claiming the gun went missing about 2 weeks prior, while Evie was still alive. He cross-checked it against Jack's claimed basement painting schedule, early October, and found they aligned. In Keene's mind, the timeline was forming a chain: basement painting, weapon lost, and 2 weeks later, the disappearance. Yet no physical proof linked them. He filed all data under pending correlation and prepared a summary report for the county. Jack was allowed to leave, but told to remain available. As he exited, he said only, "I understand." In the office, Keene flipped through the file again, the .38 casing photograph placed beside Jack's weapon registration, 2 small details now forming a knot. He could not yet conclude guilt, but he recognized the case had moved beyond a simple voluntary disappearance. The final report for October 30th was signed and stamped with the summary note, "Firearm discrepancy noted, subject inconsistent in statement, investigation remains open, pending further evidence." On November 2, 1959, after reviewing all forensic results and verifying inconsistencies in Jack Langford's statements, Sheriff Harold Keene decided to launch one final expanded final search of the Silver Creek Lake area and the old dam to the south. The order was issued at 7 a.m., mobilizing 8 deputies, 3 professional divers, and 2 industrial-grade metal detectors. The objective was to survey the entire lake bed within a 300-meter radius of the spot where the glove and spent shell casing had been found. The Salem Rescue Unit was called in for support, bringing motorboats and side-scan sonar to locate submerged objects. By 9 a.m., 2 boats were anchored 30 meters apart on the calm, fog-shrouded lake. Keene divided the area into 3 search grids, marking boundaries with wooden stakes. The first diver entered the water carrying lights and a depth line. The lake averaged more than 6 meters deep, with a thick mud bottom, numerous rotted logs, and buried debris. After 3 hours of searching, the team recovered only a few rusted metal scraps and glass bottles, nothing related to the case. Meanwhile, on shore, Wallace and Moore operated metal detectors along the western trail that led to the dam. Signals were weak, mostly iron nails and tin cans. At 12:15 p.m., the detector gave a strong hit near an old bush at the bank's edge. They dug and found only a broken chain segment and old boat spikes. The metal pieces were logged, photographed, and later confirmed as scrap. Keene then extended the search toward the Silver Creek Dam, a 1920s structure long out of service. The area was thick with mud and submerged stumps, difficult to navigate. A second dive team checked the southern nearshore bottom, where the water exceeded 8 meters and the current was sluggish. They carried an underwater camera and filmed the entire zone. After 2 dives totaling 40 minutes, results remained negative. The water had been stirred into thick turbidity with visibility near zero. The divers reported seeing only rocks and logs, no new objects. Keene ordered one last pass with the portable sonar unit for large metal masses, but the screen showed only scattered bottom reflections. Meanwhile, secondary teams examined the north shore, excavating 2 suspicious low spots and finding only rotted cloth fragments of undetermined origin. The samples were collected, but later identified as decomposed burlap sacks. By afternoon, Keene stood on the bank, observing, and wrote in his notebook, "No significant findings after full scan. Bottom visibility near zero, debris consistent with natural sediment." At 3:30 p.m., he ordered all underwater activity terminated and the entire team assembled at the command post. Deputies waded ashore through mud, removed gear, and the late light turned golden through the western trees. More turned in the field report, 12 soil samples surveyed, 3 hours of diving, 2 metal detector sweeps, no body or new evidence located. Keene nodded and ordered a group photo at the dam as documentation of the operation's conclusion. In a temporary office set up in a nearby resident's home, he wrote the final summary report, extended search operation conducted from November 2nd to November 3rd, covering Silver Creek Lake and dam perimeter. Negative results. No further trace of subject found. All collected samples were sealed and filed with Case 59M122. Signed off by Wallace. The following day, Keene sent formal correspondence to Marion County requesting suspension of all field search activities until new evidence or credible witnesses emerged. All photographs, maps, and reports were bound into a separate volume titled Silver Creek Extended Search. In the summary, Keene noted, area thoroughly examined by air, land, and water. No biological trace recovered. Conditions suggest no body present within surveyed range. As the sun set behind the pines, the dive team's boats were pulled from the water and mooring lines coiled. Night fog descended, covering the surface and carrying the November chill. Keene looked at the calm lake one last time, then walked to his patrol car. Behind him, the small propeller ripples faded, leaving the water mirror smooth and silent, as if no search had ever taken place. At 18:05, he signed the official termination of the Silver Creek operation, marking the final day of field investigation, with no new trace discovered. On November 5, 1959, 2 days after the Silver Creek search officially ended, Sheriff Harold Keene submitted the comprehensive report to the Marion County office. The report confirmed no new trace of Evelyn Langford, no body, personal effects, or additional signs of additional criminal activity. The entire area had been searched multiple times on land, water, and beneath the surface. Keene signed the status change from active investigation to unresolved missing person per regulation for disappearances exceeding 21 days without leads. Case 59M122 was temporarily closed pending new information. That morning, Keene convened the entire investigative team for a final review of all collected evidence. The leather glove, cloth fragments, .38 shell casing, and soil samples. Everything was sealed in 3 evidence boxes with accompanying photographs, lab reports, and chain of custody forms. Wallace cataloged the items, numbered them, and transferred them to county storage. Box 1 contained items from the Langford residence, Box 2 held lake finds, Box 3 the casing and cloth fragments. Each box was labeled Case 59M122. Missing person, Langford, Evelyn, and signed by Keene, Wallace, and the forensic technician. All investigative documents, witness statements, Jack Langford interrogation transcripts, lab results, search area maps, more than 50 crime scene photographs, and 8 technical reports were bound into 3 volumes and moved to the Marion County Criminal Records Archive. On the final page of the master volume, Keene wrote by hand, "No further evidence or leads obtained as of November 5, 1959. Investigation suspended pending new development." He signed it, applied the red seal, and handed it to Wallace for filing. By day's end, the county office issued a brief internal memo. Case 59M122 remains open under missing person classification. No active field search ongoing. Outside, light rain fell and cold wind swept the porch. In his office, Keene cleared his desk, placed the thick case folder in the third drawer beside other unsolved files, paused, and looked at Evelyn's portrait photo clipped to the first page. Gentle face, direct gaze, taken at her teacher graduation ceremony. He closed the drawer, turned the key. The metallic click echoed softly in the quiet room. He knew the case was not truly over, but there was no longer justification to continue. When the wall clock read 5 p.m., the final entry for the Evelyn Langford disappearance was signed, marking the end of the initial investigative phase. In the Marion County system, File 59M122 was officially classified unresolved missing person. The case fell silent, leaving only 3 sealed evidence boxes in the Westtown Evidence Vault on Shelf 47. Secured with lead wire, awaiting the day someone would reopen them for answers that never came in the fall of 1959. From late 1959 through the early 1960s, File 59M122 remained untouched in the Marion County Criminal Archive, with no further updates. Sheriff Harold Keene occasionally mentioned the case during year-end briefings, but received no new directives. The initial effort had stalled at suspicion without legal grounds to proceed. Silverton returned to normal life. Residents rarely spoke Evelyn Langford's name anymore, and the disappearance joined the town's list of unsolved stories. Jack Langford continued working for the police department, transferred to administration in 1963. He lived alone in the wood frame house on the town's edge, showed up for work regularly, and occasionally covered training sessions or shifts for colleagues. Personnel reports described him as stable, well-disciplined, but co-workers noted he had grown increasingly quiet, avoided socializing, and skipped gatherings. The house interior remained largely unchanged since Evie was alive. In 1968, a new highway was built past Silver Creek Lake, the former search focal point. Construction crews found no trace related to the disappearance, and the old file was not reopened. That same year, Keene retired after 30 years of service and moved to Salem. He turned his files over to successor Sheriff Thomas Reeve, who served only 4 years before leaving the profession. The Evelyn Langford case was not prioritized due to lack of data and no family request for reinvestigation. Jack retired from the Silverton Police Department in 1972 after 15 years, receiving standard pension benefits. His record read, "Duty completed, no disciplinary actions." The local paper ran a short notice, "Officer Jack Langford, 49, retires after many years of service to the Silverton community." The disappearance was not mentioned. He continued living alone, avoided public appearances, and was occasionally seen walking the main market on weekends. Neighbors described him as thinner, with premature gray hair, often staying up late, the basement light visible at night. In 1978, Jack Langford died of a heart attack at home, discovered 2 days later by a mail carrier who noticed accumulated letters. A small funeral was held at Silverton Cemetery, attended by a few former colleagues. His estate, house, modest savings, and personal effects passed to the town with no direct heirs. Per regulation, all records related to him were sealed with his wife's missing person file in the old evidence vault. After Jack's death, the Evelyn Langford's case completely vanished from Silverton Police active reports. For the next 4+ decades, File 59M122 existed only as an aging paper folder in the basement iron cabinets of the Marion County office, among hundreds of other unsolved disappearances. The original investigators retired, passed away, or moved away one by one. By the mid-1980s, the archive was moved to a new facility, fully renumbered, and the Langford case was entered into cold storage archive. No one reopened that folder. The physical evidence, 3 sealed boxes containing the glove, cloth fragments and casing, remained in their wooden cabinet, lead seals thick with dust. Time passed. Silverton expanded, part of the Abaqua Forest was logged, and Silver Creek Lake was converted into a small recreational area. New residents had no idea the site had once been the center of an unsolved disappearance. In 1999, an archivist performing inventory wrote a brief note, Case 59M122, Langford, Evelyn, status. Unresolved, no updates since 1959. That was the only time the file was touched in the new century. In 2004, when Oregon's electronic record system began digitizing old documents, the thick, brown, aging folder was brought into the light once more, still bearing its original seals and the faded signature of Harold Keene, who had died more than 10 years earlier, exactly 45 years after Evelyn Langford vanished without a trace. In February 2004, during inventory for Oregon's Criminal Records Digitization Program, retired Officer Tom Halley, invited back to help classify old cases, discovered an anomaly in File 59M122, the 1959 Evelyn Langford disappearance. Halley, who had been a young trainee under Sheriff Harold Keene in the late 1960s, noticed the file listed only 47 crime scene photographs, while the original 1959 inventory clearly stated, total 53 photographs. 6 photos were missing. He examined the remaining prints, compared sequence numbers, and found the count jumped from #29 to #36, skipping the exact period noted, basement inspection. The basement photographs were gone. Halley checked supplemental logs and the evidence section but found nothing. He noted the discrepancy in his workbook and continued reviewing Keene's remaining handwritten records. Tucked at the back of the file, he found a loose page in Keene's thin, slanted handwriting dated October 23, 1959. The day of the warranted Langford house search. It read, fresh paint on east wall, smell of thinner visible wiping marks near floor, samples taken. Below, Keene had double underlined the words, wiped clean, and added possible cleaning activity. This note had never been incorporated into the official report. Halley cross-checked the original search warrant return, which only stated generically, interior, clean, fresh paint observed, no evidence of crime, no mention of wiping marks. The difference caught his attention. Halley knew Keene was meticulous and would never ignore technical details, so the variance between the private note and the sanitized official version suggested the final report may have been edited or abbreviated before archiving. He continued searching the evidence storage log and found 2 faint entries on the last page. Paint sample #5, collected from basement wall and cloth fragment, blue towel, moisture present. No lab submission numbers followed, meaning those samples were never sent for testing. Halley searched the Marion County evidence vault, but bags #5 and #6 were missing. Only the original catalog page, bearing Keene's signature, remained. The coincidence of missing notes, missing photos, and missing samples led him to draft a separate memo in which he listed missing 6 photographs presumed to depict basement interior. Absent evidence samples #5 and #6. Handwritten note by Sheriff Keene references wiped surfaces and solvent odor. He then examined the last surviving photo before the gap, #29, which showed part of the basement stairs under dim light with a shiny wet concrete floor. In the lower corner was a faint shoe print on the bottom step, size unclear. Using a magnifying glass, Halley noted the tread pattern ran lengthwise, consistent with 1,950 Sephora police leather boots. Keene's private notebook contained an additional line, possible footprint size 10. Partial. Halley cross-referenced old personnel files. Jack Langford wore size 10.5. Though not conclusive, the detail convinced him the 1959 disappearance may not have been fully investigated. On March 12, 2004, Halley wrote a 3-page letter to the Oregon State Police Criminal Justice Division in Salem, attaching copies of the handwritten note, missing evidence catalog, and 4 scanned original photos. He wrote, based on discrepancies in archived materials and missing documentation, it is advised that Case 59M122 be re-evaluated for potential foul play. He added a personal explanation. Sheriff Keene's notes suggest unreported findings at the basement scene, possibly indicating cleanup activity inconsistent with a simple disappearance. On March 22, OSP acknowledged receipt and replied, "Materials received under review for classification update." After nearly half a century, the Evelyn Langford disappearance reappeared on an Oregon State Investigative Review list, triggered solely by 6 missing photographs and 1 forgotten page of Harold Keene's notes. In April 2004, the Oregon State Police Cold Case Review Initiative was officially launched in Salem to re-examine missing person cases, unsolved homicides, and pre-1970 backlogged files. The program was administered by the State Criminal Justice Division in coordination with county offices. Among hundreds of files flagged for evaluation, 59 M122, Evelyn Langford was assigned Priority B, missing with suspicious circumstances, based on Tom Halley's submission and supporting documents. On April 14, the file was transferred from Marion County Archive to the Salem Forensic Center for digitization and full reassessment. Contents included the 3 original volumes, 47 photographs, witness statements, sealed evidence, and Keene's handwritten notes. A 5-member review panel met in closed session for 3 consecutive days to assess record validity. In the meeting minutes, panel chairman Lieutenant Roger Clemens wrote, "Record integrity fair photographic sequence, incomplete original evidence chain partially preserved." Notable mention, missing images and possible suppressed note indicating cleaning at basement. On that recommendation, the Langford case was reclassified historical missing person, potential homicide. The OSP director signed the order to reopen, assigning it to the State Cold Case Unit. On April 26, Detective Anna Reyes, age 38, with 12 years experience and a track record solving Lane County cold homicides, was appointed lead investigator. Her internal file praised her skill with old documents and integrating modern forensic technology with fieldwork. Her team included digital imaging specialist Mark Donahue and trace evidence analyst Lisa Cheng. On April 29, Reyes formally accepted delivery of file 59 M122 at the Marion County Vault, and with Donahue, verified the 6 missing basement photos exactly as Halley reported. The 3 1959 evidence boxes remained sealed with intact lead wire and valid storage markings. The inspection log read, "Evidence sealed, box integrity stable, oxidation minor." Reyes ordered new photographs of each box and digital barcoding for future tracking. In her Salem office, she studied Halley's copy of Keene's note, "Fresh paint on east wall, smell of thinner, visible wiping marks near floor, samples taken with possible cleaning activity, underlined twice." The absence of lab reports for paint sample #5 and blue towel fragment #6 indicated those items disappeared before ever reaching the 1959 lab. Reyes noted, "Potential evidence missing pre-lab, untested chemical residues likely." After 2 days reviewing everything, she drafted a formal request to reopen at state level, citing physical signs of cleanup, missing photos, a casing matched to the husband's registered weapon, and untested samples. The report was submitted to the Oregon Cold Case Committee on May 3 and approved the same day. Director Clemens signed the official reopening under case number OSPCC 2004-11, noting, "Review case Langford Evelyn, originally filed as missing person 1959, possible homicide. Lead investigator, Det. A. Reyes." In her first week, Reyes visited Silverton to survey the original location. The Langford house, though sold multiple times, still stood at the end of Maple Drive, the roof repaired but main structure virtually unchanged. She photographed the exterior, recorded GPS coordinates, and compared them to 1959 diagrams. The basement now had a new entrance, but the east concrete wall Keene described remained beneath modern paint layers. She contacted the current owner, obtained permission, and scheduled technical examination the following week. In her report to OSP, she wrote, "Premises intact, location consistent with original scene, possible residual evidence beneath current paint layer. She also reached out to Harold Keene's family for any surviving personal notebooks. A grandson in Salem confirmed several boxes remained in storage, and she arranged a meeting. Simultaneously, she submitted formal requests to the state lab to unseal the 3 1959 evidence boxes. The OSP internal report, dated May 10, stated, "Re-evaluation initiated, Case 59M122, designated as cold case review priority." Thus, after 45 years in the darkness of the Marion County Archive, the Evelyn Langford disappearance was officially revived under the new designation. OSP Cold Case File 2004-11, led by Detective Anna Reyes, marking the beginning of the second investigative phase. On May 12, 2004, Detective Anna Reyes, along with forensic technician Lisa Cheng, proceeded to unseal 3 evidence boxes from Case File 59M122 at the Central Salem Laboratory. The unsealing protocol was conducted in accordance with Oregon State Police procedures in the presence of a representative from the Ballistics Examination Unit and the storage technician. The first box, labeled House Evidence, contained paint samples, soil, and a grayish-blue cloth rag. A musty odor wafted up when the lid was opened. The fabric fibers were frayed, and the color had almost completely faded. The second box was marked Outdoor Evidence, Silver Creek, and held a brown leather glove, a beige cloth fragment, 3 bags of dried mud, and 4 Polaroid photographs of the lakeside area. The third box, labeled Ballistics, contained 1 .38 cartridge casing, 2 reference bullets, and a copy of the 1959 ballistics report. Reyes carefully examined each item, cross-checking item numbers and sealing signatures. She immediately noticed an anomaly on the label of the first box. The signature, Keene, was in faded black ink, while the date and the words, Evidence Sealed, were in blue ink with a different pen stroke. Below it, the second signature, Deputy Moore, was also in similar blue ink. Reyes instructed Lisa to take close-up digital photographs and to swab samples of both inks for chemical comparison. While flipping through the documents clipped inside the file folder that accompanied the boxes, she discovered one page had been torn out. Only a jagged serrated edge remained between entries. Paint sample #5 and cloth sample #6. The note below read, "Transferred to lab October 25, 59, but there was no receiving signature." When Reyes cross-referenced the original inventory list in the master file, it was clear that those 2 samples had no corresponding lab results. She immediately noted in the inventory log, "Missing documentation, page removed, inconsistent ink color between signature lines." Next, Reyes examined the original Polaroid photographs. One showed the glove lying on the lakeside mud, one captured the water reflecting the tree line, and the other 2 were close-ups of the area around the fallen tree where the casing had been found. In the lower corner of each photo was a handwritten double or M, likely denoting Wallace or Moore. When held to the light, one of the prints revealed a faint fingerprint on the edge, a sweat residue stain that had turned light brown over time. Reyes asked Lisa to lift that print for potential DNA analysis, even though she knew the chances of obtaining a usable profile after so many years were slim. Moving to the third box, Reyes examined the .38 casing marked WCC-38SPL. The base had a thin layer of oxidation. Under the microscope, the rifling marks and firing pin impression were still clearly visible. The ballistics unit confirmed it could be rerun through the modern IBIS system for possible matches with historical Smith & Wesson revolvers held in the Silverton Armory archive. Reyes issued orders to transfer the evidence for parallel testing, the casing to the state ballistics lab, and DNA samples taken from a hair inside the glove, the sweat stain on the photograph, and the beige cloth fragment to the Portland Forensic Biology Lab. Everything was repackaged and resealed under new case number OSP-CC 2004-11A. While reviewing the old reports, Reyes noticed that the 1959 lab report contained two distinctly different handwritings on the same page. The upper half was written in black ink by the primary technician, while the lower half, the conclusion "no blood or biological trace," was in blue ink and a different hand. Comparison with other documents from the same year revealed the handwriting matched Deputy Moore, not the forensic technician. This prompted her to add the note, "Evidence handling irregularity, possible secondary handwriting on lab conclusion." Lisa photographed all documents and created a digital backup file. The two continued matching original label codes against the master inventory list. Result: the first box was logged as containing item 56, yet only one cloth rag was present, consistent with Halley's earlier suspicion that two samples were missing. Reyes concluded that one of the two samples, possibly the paint, had most likely been removed from the file during the 1959 transfer before results were returned. Before resealing, she signed the evidence outgoing form, specifying DNA testing, glove, fabric, photo, ballistic reevaluation, casing .38 SPL. The items were placed in polymer bags, affixed with electronic OSP seals, and shipped out that same afternoon. At the end of the report, Reyes wrote a brief comment: "Archival evidence largely intact. Minor inconsistencies suggest incomplete documentation and potential alteration of signature ink." When everything was finished, she sat alone in the dimly lit room, staring at the Polaroid of the glove lying sideways in the cold mud. In the corner of the photo, the handwritten W was fading, but still legible. She knew that a single DNA hit, or one matching rifling mark from ballistics, would officially move the Evelyn Langford case out of the dormant files it had occupied for 45 years and into an active criminal homicide investigation. On May 18, 2004, after completing the inventory and sending the samples for testing, Detective Anna Reyes applied for a search warrant for 214 Maple Drive, the former residence of Jack and Evelyn Langford, which had stood vacant for nearly a year after its last owner moved out. The warrant was approved the same day by the Marion County Court, authorizing a scene examination to determine whether any biological traces or evidence related to the 1959 disappearance remained. On the morning of May 19, Reyes, along with forensic technicians Lisa Cheng and Mark Donahue, arrived at the property. The site was a two-story wooden house with peeling white paint, windows sealed shut, and grass growing almost to the porch steps. Reyes read the warrant aloud, secured the perimeter, erected temporary barriers, and set up portable floodlights around the house. The primary focus was the rear basement, where Sheriff Harold Keene had once noted wipe marks on the wall. Inside, the air was damp and heavy with dust. The smell was a mix of old wood, old paint, and mildew. The ground floor was empty, furniture long removed, only a few nail holes left in the walls. Reyes opened the door to the basement. The wooden stairs creaked under their weight. When the halogen lights were switched on, the fresh coat of paint on the walls reflected a faint bluish glow. Lisa prepared the luminol solution and fine mist sprayer while Mark set up the infrared camera. After sealing the doors to keep the area dark, they sprayed the first application of luminol on the east wall, exactly where Keene had marked it in his notebook. Less than 30 seconds later, a faint blue chemiluminescence began to appear in irregular patches, stretching more than 5 feet along the base of the wall. Reyes stood motionless, watching, her breathing slow. Lisa noted, "Positive reaction, pattern irregular, consistent with diluted blood or protein residue." Mark took 10 rapid infrared photographs and then measured the coordinates of the glowing areas. Reyes ordered a second confirmatory spray on the concrete floor adjacent to the corner. The result was the same. Luminescence appeared in circular streaks interspersed with small spots. At 11:20 a.m., they began swabbing with sterile cotton tips, labeling samples, a 1 through a 5. Beneath the paint layer, Lisa carefully scraped off several flakes with a thin blade and placed them into preservation vials. While scanning the surface with angled light, Reyes noticed a small fingertip-sized indentation in the middle of the wall, about 60 centimeters above the floor, completely covered by paint. She tapped lightly around it. The sound was different, as if something hard was behind the plaster. Reyes marked the spot with a laser pointer, then used a hand drill to open a small hole. As the plaster fell away, a glint of metal flashed in the narrow gap. Lisa used forceps to extract a deformed, mushroomed bullet slug still dusted with paint, the tail bearing clear rifling marks characteristic of a handgun barrel. The three stood in silence for several seconds. Reyes donned fresh gloves, took the metal evidence box from Lisa, placed the bullet inside, and sealed it on the spot, labeling it Evidence Item OSP-11B. After photographing and measuring distances, Mark recorded in the log, bullet fragment embedded east wall, approximately 2 feet from floor, recovered intact. They continued scanning the rest of the wall surfaces, but found no other embedded objects. Reyes ordered additional luminol application to the ceiling and stairs. A faint glowing band appeared around the second step from the bottom, about 15 centimeters long, possibly spatter or old blood transfer that had been painted over. Lisa collected a sample there, labeled B1, and also scraped overlying paint flakes for dating analysis. Under ultraviolet light on the concrete floor, another faint smear appeared near the corner, shaped like a wide wiping motion made with a wet rag. Lisa whispered, "This could be the cleaning spot Keene described." Reyes nodded and ordered full scene photographs with precise west-east coordinates for later reconstruction. That afternoon, they checked the drain pipe and the north baseboard area, but found no further fluorescence. In total, 12 samples were collected, 5 luminol-positive swabs, 4 paint chips, 2 concrete samples, and 1 bullet. All were individually sealed under case number OSP-CC 2004-11B, accompanied by an 8-page scene report. As they left the basement, Reyes paused for a moment, watching the faint blue patches on the wall already beginning to fade. She knew those traces might be the answer. Harold Keene had seen but could never prove. At 5 p.m., Reyes signed the completion log and the transfer order, sending all samples and the bullet to the state ballistics lab for examination. In the final note of the report she wrote, "Luminol positive on east wall, latent blood trace likely. Recovered bullet lodged within structure. Scene consistent with evidence of past firearm discharge." The house was locked and resealed. On the drive back to Salem, Reyes glanced in the rearview mirror at the late-day sun, reflecting off the now-closed basement window, where, after 45 years, the first glowing traces had finally answered that Evelyn Langford's story had never truly ended. On June 26, 2004, after more than a month of continuous testing, the official DNA results from the samples collected at the Langford basement were delivered from the Portland Forensic Biology Laboratory to Oregon State Police Headquarters in Salem. The 12-page report, stamped in red, was signed by Dr. Harold Myers, head of genetic analysis. The opening line of the conclusion read, "Sample set OSP-CC 2004-11B, biological material, identified as human blood, female origin. Samples taken from the east wall and the staircase tested positive for human DNA, with genetic markers confirming female sex and ruling out cross-contamination from animal or environmental sources. Notably, samples A2 and B1 showed a 99.98% genetic match, proving they came from the same individual." The lab then compared the profiles against the National CODIS database and referenced samples from the victims' relatives. During the investigation, Detective Anna Reyes had contacted Evelyn's only surviving relative, her niece Margaret Hill, who called Evelyn aunt, now living in Corvallis, and obtained a comparison sample. The comparative analysis showed a maternal line match probability of 99.87%. The report concluded, biological traces collected from 214 Maple Drive consistent with female relative of subject Langford Evelyn. Chemical analysis confirmed the luminol reacted to human hemoglobin, ruling out paint or cleaning agents. The blood had been repeatedly cleaned, penetrating deep into the old wall surface in the exact location Harold Keene had noted in 1959 as cleaned with solvent. Additionally, Paint chip analysis revealed abnormally high levels of chlorine and organic solvents, consistent with industrial-grade cleaners used in the 1950s. After reading the report, Reyes sat quietly for a moment, then immediately called Lieutenant Roger Clemens, head of the Cold Case Review Unit, to inform him the basement scene contained the victim's blood, proving the 1959 disappearance involved violence. That afternoon, an emergency meeting was held at OSP Salem, attended by Clemens, Reyes, the two forensic technicians, and a representative from the state prosecutor's office. Reyes presented the full chain of evidence: Harold Keene's notes about wall cleaning, the luminol photographs, the DNA match to Evelyn's relative, and the bullet still awaiting ballistics results. She concluded, the Langford residence is the crime scene. The victim's blood proves she did not leave the house voluntarily. The state prosecutor signed the reclassification of the case from unresolved missing person to homicide investigation. The official document was issued June 27, 2004, under new file number OSP-HM 2004-11, with the note, reclassification based on confirmed biological evidence linking scene to missing person Evelyn Langford. The same day, Marion County received copies confirming the case was officially reopened as a homicide. Local media ran short articles. Cold case reopened after 45 years. New forensic evidence connects missing woman to residents. Details of the DNA findings were withheld to protect the investigation. Reyes continued reviewing the original 1959 files, paying particular attention to the two missing samples, paint #5 and cloth #6, because she now knew they might have contained blood quantities undetectable by the technology of that era. In her office, she pinned new basement photos beside the few surviving 1959 images, comparing the glowing areas to the region Keene had suspected. The overlap was exact. Reyes noted, blood presence confirmed, corroborates Keene's note. Scene alteration deliberate. She realized Harold Keene had been right all those years ago when he sensed something wrong beneath the fresh paint. That afternoon she followed up with the ballistics lab regarding the recovered bullet. In the internal log for that day she wrote, DNA confirmation establishes crime scene linkage. Case upgraded to homicide. Await ballistic correlation. When the report copy was entered into the system, the Evelyn Langford case officially left the missing persons archive and entered Oregon's active suspicious homicide list. In the quiet of her office, Reyes placed her hand on the yellowed old file, where the words unresolved missing person had been boldly crossed out and replaced with bright red lettering. Homicide investigation. Active. After 45 years, the case the entire town of Silverton had forgotten was now confirmed to have a victim, a crime scene, and a real crime hidden behind layers of paint at 214 Maple Drive. On July 14, 2004, while the Evelyn Langford case had just been reclassified as a homicide investigation, an unexpected discovery occurred at the Silver Creek Dam, approximately 2 miles south of the Langford home. A crew from the Silverton Water and Sewer Department, while dredging mud and reinforcing the spillway, uncovered a strange object trapped more than 5 feet deep in the sediment. As the bucket was lifted, the wet mud broke apart, revealing a whitish bone fragment and a rusted black metal object beside it. The foreman immediately halted all work and called local police. By 10:40 a.m., the Oregon State Police Investigation Unit, led directly by Detective Anna Reyes, arrived on scene, established a security perimeter, and sealed off a 100-meter radius around the find. The location was at the edge of the old dam basin, where the water level had been lowered for dredging. In the mud pit, technicians clearly identified human skeletal structures, part of a skull, rib sections, and a right femur. Nearby lay a .38 semi-automatic handgun, its steel frame heavily rusted and wooden grip almost rotted away. Reyes ordered manual excavation of the entire surrounding area. Mud was removed, layer by layer, rinsed, and sifted. By noon, additional bones were recovered, gradually forming an almost complete skeleton lying on its side in the thick mud, head pointing north. A broken leather cord was wrapped around the left wrist bones, and beneath the mud technicians located a metal belt buckle engraved with the faint initials, E.L. Reyes noted in the log, skeletal remains consistent with adult female approximate burial depth, 1.6 MeV, associated firearm recovered nearby. The handgun was sealed on-site under item number OSP HM 2004-11C, photographed in place, then transferred to an anti-oxidation bag. When the mud was gently wiped from the frame, faint engraving became visible. Smith & Wesson .38 Special, serial number 213784. Reyes paused, looked at the number, then checked the case file. It was the exact serial number of the revolver registered to Jack Langford in 1957. The gun he had reported lost 2 weeks before his wife disappeared. The entire team fell silent. Only the sound of dripping water from the pump could be heard. Reyes immediately contacted the Salem Ballistics Lab, requesting emergency intake to compare the gun with the 1959 casing. All evidence was collected, photographed, cataloged and transported by specialized vehicle to Salem within 2 hours. The human remains were simultaneously transferred to the State Forensic Anthropology Lab for identification. Preliminary examination determined female sex, age at death approximately 25-35, estimated height 5'4", consistent with Evelyn Langford's records. The skull showed a circular fracture on the right temple, 0.9 centimeters in diameter, with outward beveling characteristic of a close-range gunshot entry wound. The opposite side exhibited an exit fracture, the bullet trajectory sloped downward, consistent with the body lying horizontally when shot. The lab removed 1 molar and a femur section for DNA comparison with Evelyn's relative sample. At the same time, the OSP Forensic Odontology Unit compared the remains with dental records from the Silverton Dental Office dated 1958. On July 20th, the comparison results showed a perfect match, teeth numbers 14 and 18, along with distinctive amalgam fillings on the left lateral incisor, were identical to Evelyn Langford's dental chart. The report concluded, dental records confirm identity of skeletal remains as Langford Evelyn. Cause of death, single gunshot wound to the head. When Reyes read those words, she sat motionless for several minutes, then signed the confirmation. After 45 years, the missing woman had been found, and the murder weapon, Jack Langford's own Smith & Wesson, lay right beside her remains. The following day, a summary report sent to the Oregon State Prosecutor's Office stated, recovered firearm serial number matches, registered weapon of spouse, ballistic and anatomical evidence consistent with homicide. In the evidence vault, the rusted revolver was placed in its own box labeled primary evidence. Reyes stood looking at the photograph of the skull with its bullet hole, then down at the serial number etched deep into the metal, knowing that the suspicions Harold Keene had carried all those years ago now had undeniable physical proof. Silver Creek, once deemed meaningless after the desperate 1959 searches, had after all kept both the victim's body and the murder weapon hidden within it for nearly half a century. On July 23, 2004, just 3 days after dental records confirmed the remains at Silver Creek Dam were those of Evelyn Langford, Detective Anna Reyes began the process of cross-referencing the entire 1959 investigative file with modern forensic data. The goal was to determine why the case had been suspended and to assess the possibility that the original file had been tampered with. Together with technician Mark Donahue, she reopened all 47 original Polaroid photographs, projecting them side by side on a digital screen alongside the 2004 three-dimensional crime scene reconstruction. The first discrepancy was immediately apparent. In the original report, the location of mud samples and items recovered at Silver Creek was recorded as 3 meters from the water's edge, northeast direction, but on Reyes's new survey map, the excavation site of the remains was in the southwest section of the dam, nearly 180 meters away from that point. That area had been noted in 1959 as not feasible for search due to deep mud. Second, one 1959 photograph numbered #29, the last remaining image from the basement series, clearly showed a bright streaking stain on the east wall, identical in appearance to the luminol reaction Reyes obtained in 2004. Yet in the official report submitted at the time by Sheriff Harold Keene, there was no detailed description of the stain or any mention of samples taken from that area. The only line read, "Walls freshly painted, no abnormalities observed." Reyes believed this section of the report had been edited after it was initially written. She asked Donahue to compare the handwriting on the 1959 report with other documents from the same period. The analysis revealed two different inks. The initial description, "fresh paint on east wall," was written in black ink, with pen strokes matching Keene's signature. The concluding sentence, "no evidence observed," was in blue ink with handwriting matching that of Deputy Moore, who had overseen the scene. This proved the report had been supplemented or altered after Keene signed it. Further examination revealed that in the original photo log, photographs #34 and #35 had been replaced with poor quality duplicates. The angles were off and the lighting different, proving they were not taken at the same time as the originals. A handwritten pencil note on the back of #34 read, "Retake, too dark." Based on paper aging and structure, that note was written at least several days later. Reyes requested the forensic lab date the paper using carbon isotope analysis. The results confirmed the photographic paper came from a batch manufactured in 1960, meaning after the case had already been closed. This delay showed that at least 2 crime scene photographs had been replaced after the investigation ended. While reviewing the evidence inventory, Reyes and Lisa Cheng also compared the evidence numbers recorded in Keene's report with the official storage catalog. They discovered a systematic discrepancy. Items paint sample #5 and cloth sample #6 appeared in Keene's notebook but were absent from the official catalog, while 2 later added entries, soil sample 5A and debris 6A, bore Moore's blue ink signature. This reinforced the suspicion that original samples containing blood traces had been swapped or removed. In her internal memo to Chief Clemens, Reyes wrote, "Evidence substitution highly probable, documentation altered post-investigation closure, likely to conceal biological trace or firearm discharge." She added that at the time the case was closed, both Moore and Wallace were still in office, and Moore was the last person to sign the evidence log. There was no signature from Keene. Upon deeper review, Donahue discovered another critical detail on the 1959 scene map. The marked location where the glove was found was on the east bank of the lake. Yet the Polaroids clearly showed the west bank, proving the original diagram had been rotated 180 degrees, deliberately placing the Silver Creek Dam area where the remains were later found, outside the official search zone. Reyes concluded there had been at least 2 acts of interference, 1 alteration or removal of basement photographs and blood sample data, and 2 modification of the search map to misdirect the investigation away from the actual location. The 11-page summary report was completed on the evening of July 24 and submitted to the Cold Case Review Office with the conclusion, "Archival record compromised, original investigation integrity breached." Evidence points to deliberate modification of scene documentation, likely by involved personnel post-1959 inspection. At the same time, Reyes received confirmation from the ballistics lab that the bullet recovered from the wall matched 100% the Smith & Wesson revolver found at the dam, a firearm registered to Jack Langford. The match between the bullet, the basement scene, and the burial site completed the chain of physical evidence, while the discrepancies in the old files proved the original investigation had been manipulated to conceal the crime. In her Salem office, Reyes looked up at the crowded evidence board, one side showing scanned 1959 photographs, the other the 2004 luminol images, 2 walls in the same location, nearly half a century apart, now connected into a single truth. She wrote the final line of the report to the state prosecutor, Case 59-122, compromised through human interference. Classification tampering confirmed. Proceed as homicide review. On July 28, 2004, Detective Anna Reyes contacted retired Officer Tom Halley, the man who had first noticed the missing basement photographs, and forwarded the file to Oregon State Police for a formal interview now that the case had been reclassified as a homicide investigation. The meeting took place at the OSP Salem office, attended by Reyes, a recording technician, and a representative from the state prosecutor's office. Halley, age 73, entered the room slowly, carrying an old brown envelope he said he had kept for decades. Reyes explained the purpose of the interview. They needed to verify the origin of the missing photographs and the evidence of file tampering. Halley nodded, sat down, his eyes old but alert. He began recounting his experience in 1960 when he was a young officer in the Marion County Sheriff's Office. After Harold Keene retired, the Evelyn Langford file was transferred to the new sheriff, Thomas Reeve. According to Halley, he was assigned to assist in standardizing the records for long-term archiving. "I remember it clearly," he said. On the very first day went through the original photos. 6 pictures of the basement clearly showed dark streaks on the wall. Even to the naked eye they looked like blood. But Sheriff Reeve said Keene had gone too far, and the case had to be closed to protect the department's image. Reyes asked for specifics. Halley explained that Reeve ordered him to remove any photographs inconsistent with the official conclusion. When Halley objected that they were crime scene evidence, Reeve replied, "We cannot let the public think an officer like Langford could be involved in a murder." According to Halley, he was forced to hand the 6 original photographs to Deputy Moore, who took the envelope and left the storage room. "I never saw them again," he said quietly. When asked if he had proof, Halley opened the envelope he brought and produced 2 yellowed sheets of paper, copies of an internal photo transfer form bearing his signature in the corner, and a handwritten note, delivered to D. Moore for review, dated March 15, 1960. Reyes examined them under a magnifying glass. The handwriting and ink matched the old files, confirming authenticity. Halley added that afterward, he was transferred to administrative duties and denied further access to the Langford file. "Moore told me, 'Don't let a few photos cost you your job,'" Halley recalled, his voice hoarse. Reyes asked if he remembered the content of the photos. He replied, "One showed the east wall with a long dark streak. Another showed a wet patches on the cement floor, and the rest were close-ups of small round marks. I believe they were bullet holes. Remember clearly because Keene was standing right next to me at the time. He looked at the pictures and only said, 'These are things they will never let us keep.'" Halley said he still believed Keene had not agreed with closing the investigation, but was pressured into submitting a report stating no evidence of criminal activity. Reyes asked if he knew why the report contained 2 different inks. Halley confirmed he had personally witnessed Moore adding the conclusion to the report before sending it to the clerk. He said Keene would sign it without reading carefully, because the case was already over, Halley said. Reyes asked him to put everything in writing. Halley agreed, and signed a 4-page statement that read, "I confirm received direct instructions from Sheriff Thomas Reeve via Deputy Moore to destroy or remove 6 Langford basement crime scene photographs in 1960. The document was sealed as testimonial evidence under Code OSPHM 2004-11B. After signing, Halley pulled one more item from the envelope, a single old black and white photograph with worn corners, the only copy he had kept against orders. The image was faded, but still clearly showed a concrete wall with a long dark streak, and the silhouette of a person standing at an angle, possibly Keene. Reyes took it, placed it in an evidence sleeve, and stared at it for a long time. It was the first photograph from the missing series, matching Halley's description perfectly, and corresponding exactly to the spot where she had detected luminol glow in 2004. Combined with the DNA and ballistics results, the final piece proving file tampering had surfaced. Reyes asked her last question. "Why do you think they hid it?" Halley looked her straight in the eye. "Because he was one of us. They were afraid one of their own would be charged with killing his wife." When Keene objected, they erased the evidence, closed the file, and let the case drown. Reyes nodded and ended the interview at 17:15. Everything was recorded and signed. In the statement summary, she wrote, "Witness Hallie credible, provided contemporaneous documentation supporting intentional suppression of evidence by law enforcement personnel in 1960. Statement aligns with forensic inconsistencies. The testimony was filed with the reopened case 59M122, confirming for the first time in 45 years that the Evelyn Langford case was not only a crime, but a deliberate cover-up by the very agency that had investigated it." On August 2, 2004, after obtaining Tom Halley's statement confirming the destruction of evidence in 1960, Detective Anna Reyes immediately filed for an additional search warrant for the house at 214 Maple Drive, now established as the original crime scene. In her application to the Marion County Court, she argued that the new testimony, combined with DNA and ballistics evidence, provided sufficient legal grounds to expand the search for any remaining physical evidence, particularly in the basement. The warrant was approved within 24 hours, authorizing excavation and detailed examination of walls, flooring, and drainage pipes. On the morning of August 4, Reyes returned to the scene with the forensic team, Lisa Cheng, Mark Donahue, and 2 assisting technicians. The house remained sealed from the previous search, seals intact. After rereading the warrant and logging the time, they carried all equipment to the basement: halogen lights, infrared scanners, ground-penetrating radar, and micro-excavation tools. Reyes focused on the northeast corner wall, where luminol had previously reacted most strongly. When the radar scanned the area, it registered an anomaly at a depth of 20 centimeters beneath the concrete floor. The team used a small coring drill to open the surface, then steel trowels to remove layers of cement dust. On the third layer, the blade struck something softer and fibrous. Lisa leaned in with a handheld light, a small piece of dark gray cloth, hardened and embedded in the cement. She removed it with tweezers, placed it in an evidence bag, and labeled it OSP HM 2411E. Reyes ordered the surrounding 30 centimeters area expanded. 2 more similar cloth fragments were found, caked with dried mud, one bearing a woven pattern typical of 1950s handkerchiefs. While scraping cement from the wall corner, Lisa noticed a small void filled with old plaster. She carefully pried away pieces with pliers, revealing a hollow containing a round metal object and several shards of glass. Mark extracted them with forceps. They were the cap of a Four Roses whiskey bottle, a brand popular in the late 1950s. Reyes noted in her log, possible alcoholic container consistent with domestic scene. Continuing to probe the floor by hand, Lisa located a small hard object in the mortar and pulled out a thin metal bracelet with the barely visible engraved initials, EL inside. She sealed it in a bag, labeled E7, and photographed it in place. When ultraviolet light was shown on the recovered cloth fragments, 2 samples exhibited faint fluorescence. Reyes ordered preliminary DNA swabs and immediate sealed transport to the Portland Biology Lab. The search lasted until early afternoon. 11 new items were collected: 3 cloth fragments, 1 whiskey bottle cap, 1 piece of glass, 1 bracelet, plus cement dust and hair samples from wall cracks. Everything was photographed, numbered, placed in anti-moisture bags, and signed for chain of custody. Before leaving, Reyes ordered the entire basement area resealed for preservation. She paid particular attention to the bracelet because in a 1958 family photograph, Evelyn Langford was wearing an identical thin silver one engraved with her initials. On August 9, the DNA results arrived. 2 of the 3 cloth samples contained human female blood, with genetic markers matching the family reference sample for Evelyn Langford exactly. The hair sample also matched the same DNA profile. The report concluded, all biological samples recovered from 214 Maple Drive correspond to same female individual identified as Langford Evelyn. Probable blood transfer on fabric, high confidence of origin at scene. Additionally, chemical testing on the whiskey bottle cap revealed faint residual fingerprints of a large loop pattern consistent with a male hand. Although the DNA was insufficient for identification, when combined with details from the old file, the spent casing, blood bullet in the wall, and gun recovered from the dam, the scene now formed a complete evidentiary chain: violent act in the basement, fatal injury to the victim, body subsequently removed from the house and dumped at Silver Creek Dam. The bracelet and blood-soaked cloth fragments became the most crucial pieces of evidence, proving Evelyn had been injured inside her own home. In her August 10 memo to the state prosecutor, Reyes wrote, "Recovered artifacts from basement include female bracelet engraved EL, fabric fragments with confirmed blood match to victim, and whiskey bottle debris indicative of presence of spouse during altercation. Scene confirmed as primary homicide site." Simultaneously, the Oregon Prosecutor's Office updated the case file, elevating it to state level under the classification, homicide. Evidence confirmed at original residence. The new examination results and items were stored in the Central Salem Evidence Vault in a separately sealed box, coded OSPHM 2004-11E. Reyes signed the final line of the supplemental scene report while looking at Evelyn's photograph in the file, a gentle smile that had lain silent in the mud of Silver Creek for 45 years. But now, the blood-stained cloth scraps and silver bracelet spoke for her. She had died in the basement of the very house where she once lived. On August 15, 2004, after the basement DNA and physical evidence confirmed the crime location, Detective Anna Reyes moved into the phase of verifying persons connected to the case, focusing on Jack Langford's family. Marion County Archives showed that Jack and Evelyn had no children together, but Jack had a son from his first marriage, Michael Langford, born in 1955, only 4 years old at the time of the disappearance. Current personnel records revealed that Michael was the sitting Silverton police chief, appointed in 1999, after more than 20 years of service. The fact that the original suspect's son now held the top law enforcement position in the same town required Reyes to conduct the interview through fully independent procedure under the supervision of Chief Roger Clemens. On August 17, Reyes and a state prosecutor representative went to Silverton Police Headquarters to meet Michael Langford. The session was recorded and documented under code OSPHM 2004-11F. When Reyes explained that the investigation concerned the Evelyn Langford case, Michael remained calm and said he knew very little because my father never talked about it. He stated that at the time Evelyn disappeared he was living with his grandmother in Salem and only visited his father in Silverton on occasional weekends. Reyes asked for his earliest memories of Evelyn. He replied, "I remember her as kind. She used to read books to me. Then one day she was gone. The adults said she had left, and that was it." When asked if anyone in the family ever mentioned it later, Michael said his father rarely spoke of Evelyn, only that it was a sad story best left alone. Reyes briefly outlined that new evidence showed Evelyn had died by violence in the basement of the old house, and that her remains were recovered at Silver Creek Dam along with a gun registered to Jack Langford. Michael was silent for several seconds, then said, "If that's true, I want to know the truth like everyone else." While reviewing the evidence inventory, Reyes and Lisa Cheng also compared the evidence numbers recorded in Keene's report with the official storage catalog. They discovered a systematic discrepancy. Items paint sample #5 and cloth sample #6 appeared in Keene's notebook but were absent from the official catalog, while two later added entries, soil sample 5A and debris 6A, bore Moore's blue ink signature. This reinforced the suspicion that original samples containing blood traces had been swapped or removed. In her internal memo to Chief Clemens, Reyes wrote evidence substitution highly probable, documentation altered post-investigation closure, likely to conceal biological trace or firearm discharge. She added that at the time the case was closed, both Moore and Wallace were still in office, and Moore was the last person to sign the evidence log. There was no signature from Keene. Upon deeper review, Donahue discovered another critical detail on the 1959 scene map, The marked location where the glove was found was on the east bank of the lake. Yet the Polaroids clearly showed the west bank, proving the original diagram had been rotated 180 degrees, deliberately placing the Silver Creek Dam area where the remains were later found, outside the official search zone. Reyes concluded there had been at least 2 acts of interference, 1 alteration or removal of basement photographs and blood sample data, and 2 modification of the search map to misdirect the investigation away from the actual location. The 11-page summary report was completed on the evening of July 24th and submitted to the Cold Case Review Office with the conclusion, archival record compromised, original investigation integrity breached. Evidence points to deliberate modification of scene documentation, likely by involved personnel post-1959 inspection. At the same time, Reyes received confirmation from the ballistics lab that the bullet recovered from the wall matched 100% the Smith & Wesson revolver found at the dam, a firearm registered to Jack Langford. The match between the bullet, the basement scene, and the burial site completed the chain of physical evidence, while the discrepancies in the old files proved the original investigation had been manipulated to conceal the crime. In her Salem office, Reyes looked up at the crowded evidence board, one side showing scanned 1959 photographs, the other the 2004 luminol images, 2 walls in the same location, nearly half a century apart, now connected into a single truth. She wrote the final line of the report to the state prosecutor, Case 59-122, compromised through human interference. Classification tampering confirmed. Proceed as homicide review. On July 28, 2004, Detective Anna Reyes contacted retired Officer Tom Halley, the man who had first noticed the missing basement photographs, and forwarded the file to Oregon State Police for a formal interview now that the case had been reclassified as a homicide investigation. The meeting took place at the OSP Salem office, attended by Reyes, a recording technician, and a representative from the state prosecutor's office. Halley, age 73, entered the room slowly, carrying an old brown envelope he said he had kept for decades. Reyes explained the purpose of the interview. They needed to verify the origin of the missing photographs and the evidence of file tampering. Halley nodded, sat down, his eyes old but alert. He began recounting his experience in 1960, when he was a young officer in the Marion County Sheriff's Office. After Harold Keene retired, the Evelyn Langford file was transferred to the new sheriff, Thomas Reeve. According to Halley, he was assigned to assist in standardizing the records for long-term archiving. I remember it clearly, he said. But my father has been dead almost 30 years. I can't speak for him. Reyes asked whether he was aware his father had ever been suspected or internally investigated in 1959. Michael said he had never heard anything about it because as he grew up, his grandfather, also in law enforcement, always insisted the case had been cleared, no crime involved. Reyes observed his reactions and noted his voice remained steady with no avoidance. When asked about any of his father's old documents, Michael said that after Jack died, all personal effects, including notebooks, badges, and mementos, were donated to the Silverton Police Department for their heritage room. Reyes requested permission to examine them. Michael agreed and scheduled it for the following day. The interview lasted over 2 hours and centered on family relationships and memories from the time of the disappearance. No contradictions or signs of concealment emerged. In her notes, Reyes wrote, "Subject cooperative, provided factual statements, tone consistent with lack of prior knowledge, no immediate contradiction noted." That same afternoon, she and the technical team visited the Silverton PD storage room containing historical items. In Jack Langford's display box were his old badge, a 1967 duty log, and a small wooden box engraved with his name. Inside were only a few family photos and a handwritten note, "To my son, carry this name with honor." Nothing related to the Evelyn Langford case was present. Reyes photographed everything, resealed the box, and returned it to Michael. Before leaving, she asked if he would voluntarily provide a DNA sample to exclude or confirm the faint fingerprint found on the whiskey bottle cap. Michael hesitated a few seconds, then agreed, "If it helps close this story, I'll do it." The biological sample was collected that day and sent to the state forensics. In her consolidated report to Chief Clemens on August 18, Reyes wrote, "Interview with Sheriff Michael Langford conducted without obstruction. No sign of deliberate withholding or defensive behavior. Preliminary impression, unconnected to 1959 event." However, she added that Michael's high-ranking position in Silverton required every investigative step to remain completely independent and confidential to avoid any conflict of interest. That night, while reviewing the interview recording, Reyes wrote a short note in her personal log, "No contradictions, but he still carries the Langford name, and that house still falls under the department he leads." She underlined the sentence twice, closing a day of questioning that yielded no breakthroughs yet opened a deeper layer of complexity when the descendant of the suspected killer now wears the badge that once protected the same town that hid his father's crime. On August 20, 2004, just 3 days after the initial interview, Michael Langford proactively contacted Detective Anna Reyes, requesting a private meeting to clarify a few more things about the case. The meeting was arranged at the OSP Salem office, attended by Reyes, a representative from the state prosecutor's office, and a recording technician. Michael appeared tense, no longer displaying the calm demeanor he had shown before. He said that after the interrogation, he had gone home and looked through some of his father's keepsakes, and old memories I thought were buried suddenly came back. Reyes asked him to be specific. After a few minutes of silence, Michael began to speak slowly. "The night Mrs. Evelyn disappeared, I was only 4 years old. That day my father picked me up from my grandmother's house and brought me back to the house in Silverton. I remember it very clearly because the house smelled strongly of paint and bleach, which made me cough. Dad told me to go upstairs to bed. As I lay there, I heard footsteps and the sound of something heavy being dragged in the basement. When I came downstairs looking for him, I saw him kneeling on the floor, holding a rag. He looked at me and said, 'Go back to your room right now, your mother is sick.'" Reyes asked if he was certain about this memory. Michael replied, "I had doubted that memory wasn't real, but after hearing she was found at Silver Creek Dam, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore." He bowed his head and added, "I saw dark stains on his shirt, possibly blood. The next morning when she was gone, he told me to forget it and never tell anyone." Reyes paused for a few seconds, then asked softly, "Have you ever told this to anyone?" Michael shook his head. "No, I always believed he was innocent, until I myself found what he had left behind." He opened his bag and took out a thin gray file envelope labeled Langford Estate Archive. Inside were 2 old yellowed sheets titled Marion County Evidence Transfer Log, 1960. The last line bore the signature M. Langford in an immature handwriting that matched known samples from his youth. Reyes skimmed it, her heart pounding. It was the evidence list for case 59M122, clearly noting paint sample #5 and cloth sample #6, with the note moved to secondary storage. June 10, 60. Michael said, "I found it in my father's box, hidden behind an old photograph. I understand this is proof that evidence was removed from the file, and that my father or someone in the department interfered." Reyes asked how long he had kept the documents. He replied that he had discovered them in 1985 while cleaning out his father's house after his death, but hadn't understood their significance until the case was reopened. "I thought they were just administrative papers, but now I know they were buried evidence," he said. Reyes asked if he had done anything with other documents. Michael was silent for a long time before admitting there was another box of files containing old photographs and some papers belonging to Sheriff Reeve. "In 1986, when I had just joined the force, a superior suggested it would be best to preserve my father's honor. I took that box to the department incinerator and burned everything." Reyes looked at him without expression and simply asked, "Do you realize you destroyed criminal evidence?" Michael nodded slightly. Yes. But at the time I didn't think it was evidence, just old relics. I didn't want my father's past to ruin my career. Reyes asked him to describe the contents of the box before it was destroyed. Michael recalled a stack of blurry Polaroid photos, a small leather-bound notebook, and an envelope sealed with Sheriff Reeves' mark. He said, "I only glanced at one photo that showed our house wall and a dark stain on the floor. I knew it was the basement. I thought it was nothing, but now I understand, it was what they had hidden." Reyes asked him to sign a detailed statement. Michael read every line, then signed with a trembling hand, admitting to the complete destruction of documents and confirming his memory of his father the night Evelyn disappeared. When the prosecutor asked why he chose to reveal it now, he answered, "Because I'm a police officer. I can't let an unidentified person continue to suffer injustice, even if it dishonors my family name." The statement was numbered OSP-HM 2004-11G, 7 pages long, noting witness provides first-hand recollection of suspect activity and confirms destruction of historical evidence. After signing, Michael asked to leave the room, walking away slowly without looking back. Reyes sat for a long time, staring at the statement in front of her. The words, "I saw my father wiping the floor, his shirt stained with blood," like the final cut connecting 45 years of questions. When she closed the file, she wrote on the cover, "Witness statement confirms direct observation of cleanup activity and evidence suppression. Credible. Proceed for full case correlation." With that testimony, the final picture of the night Evelyn Langford disappeared finally took shape. The husband, the basement, the blood, and the silence that had lasted through 3 generations finally began to crack. On August 25, 2004, after receiving Michael Langford's statement regarding the destruction of documents and the remaining papers, Detective Anna Reyes sent all original 1959-1960 records from Case 59M122 to the Oregon State Police Historical Document Examination Laboratory for ink, paper, and signature authenticity testing. The goal was to determine the authenticity of Sheriff Harold Keene's signature and the timing of any file alterations. The lab, led by Dr. Audrey Finch, used Raman spectroscopy and carbon isotope analysis to date the ink and identify different ink phases on the same document. After 2 weeks, the 13-page report was returned to the OSP Salem office on September 9. The most critical finding was summarized under signature and ink sequence. It stated, on document titled Final Report, Case 59M122, the main text and initial signature line by Sheriff Harold Keene were produced using black iron gall ink typical of the late 1950s. However, the terminal loop of the signature and the adjacent date marking Nov. 5, 1959 were executed with blue ballpoint ink introduced in commercial circulation after 1961. This proved the final part of the signature was added at least 2 years after Keene left office. Under the microscope, the blue ink overlaid the black, confirming the document had been reopened and altered. Spectroscopic analysis showed clear differences in isotope ratios and pigments between the 2 inks, concluding that the original H.E. Keene had been partially copied or extended with a different pen. The report also noted that pen pressure for the blue ink was twice as deep as the rest, indicating a different signing habit from Keene. When compared to Keene's known 1958-1959 handwriting samples, the slant and curve of the letter key did not match. The key in the questioned document had a 55-degree slant, while Keene consistently used 47 degrees. The conclusion read, signature partially forged or retraced. Additions likely made post-1961 by another individual. Additionally, in the supplemental report, the final line, "No further action recommended," was written in glycol-based chemical ink, a type not available in Oregon until 1962. Based on these findings, Dr. Finch determined the document had been reopened and altered at least once in 1962, 3 years after the case was closed. Examination of typewriter impressions showed the main content used Courier 10 font, while the added line, "Case closed per administrative review," used Elite 12 font. A Remington model only delivered to Marion County in March 1962. The report concluded, document modified post-investigation, mechanical and chemical evidence indicate update or alteration in 1962, not consistent with Sheriff Keene's term. Reyes read every line, feeling her long-held suspicions confirmed. The file had been reopened after Keene retired. The signature extended to legitimize the closure, most likely by his successor, Sheriff Thomas Reeve, with assistance from Deputy Moore. She requested Finch expand testing to all Keene-signed documents in the case to determine the scope of forgery. Additional results showed 2 other copies, evidence inventory, and lab request form, exhibited similar ink traces and the same heavier misaligned extension of the H in Keene. Chemical analysis also detected cellulose nitrate coating on the signature edges, a thin varnish used to protect ink, proving the person who altered it deliberately applied a protective layer to prevent smudging or later detection. Finch noted, protective coating applied intentionally to altered ink. Preservation attempt indicates deliberate tampering. Upon receiving the supplemental report on September 11, Reyes held an emergency meeting with Chief Clemens and the state prosecutor's representative. She explained that the discovery of post-1961 ink and 1962 typewriter font confirmed official case records were tampered with at least 3 years after Keene retired, meaning evidence was altered to protect someone inside the department. Chief Clemens signed an order to open a special internal investigation into tampering with public records. Reyes wrote in the internal memo, forensic document analysis confirms signature alteration, ink inconsistency, and typographic mismatch. Original sheriff's authorization falsified after 1961. Case 59 M122 records compromised by administrative interference. That evening she sat alone in her empty office, the yellow light falling on the report, showing blue ink over black, 2 colors symbolizing 2 generations of law enforcement, one who left questions, one who erased traces. Reyes gently touched the forged H. Keene and whispered, as if speaking to the deceased, "You were right, and they were afraid of that." On September 20, 2004, after document examination confirmed the 1959 file had been altered, Detective Anna Reyes moved to the full crime scene reconstruction phase of the Evelyn Langford case using ballistic, DNA, and physical evidence. The Oregon State Police Forensic Services Division formed a team consisting of ballistics expert Patrick Lowell, crime scene reconstruction specialist Dana Shue, and bloodstain pattern analyst Jason Collier. Initial data came from the bullet recovered from the basement wall at 214 Maple Drive, the Smith & Wesson .38 found at Silver Creek Dam, and the original wall structure diagrams. Ballistic examination confirmed the rifling marks on the bullet perfectly matched the barrel of Jack Langford's gun, serial number 213784. Lowell determined the shot was fired from a height, 1.1 meters above the floor, at a 30-degree downward angle, from approximately 0.9 meters away from the point of impact on the east wall. The bullet traveled left to right, indicating the shooter stood less than 1 meter from the victim, slightly offset toward the staircase side. Impact energy analysis and wall indentation confirmed a single shot with sufficient force to penetrate the skull and embed in concrete. The report stated, trajectory consistent with a single gunshot at close range, fired at approximately 0.9 meters distance, downward angle, suggesting shooter taller than victim by approx. 15 centimeters. Combining this with Evelyn's height of 5'4" inches, 1.62 m, and Jack Langford's 5'10" inches, 1.78 m, the reconstruction showed the shooter standing near the basement door, while the victim was against the east wall, either seated or kneeling when shot. Reyes watched the 3D simulation as a red laser swept through the dark basement space, the bullet path intersecting precisely with the area where luminol once glowed. Jason Collier ran bloodstain simulation using fluorescence data and wall samples. The software showed a reverse cone spatter pattern from the impact point, spreading 40 centimeters horizontally, exactly matching the blue glow Reyes had documented along the baseboard. Blood droplet dispersion and downward flow direction toward the floor drain proved the victim was shot on site, with blood hitting the wall and floor before cleanup. High chlorine and organic solvent levels in the old paint layer confirmed use of strong cleaning agents, specifically a bleach and xylene mixture, commonly used to obscure bloodstains. The final report concluded, bloodstain pattern consistent with single gunshot wound to head position indicates on-site impact. Cleaning agents detected correspond to known household solvents available 1950s. Under UV light, residual blood droplets appeared in an arc, matching the bullet trajectory and victim position. Lowell pointed at the screen. The bullet path crossed that glowing area in perfect alignment. Reyes stood silently viewing the completed model. A female figure kneeling against the wall, bullet piercing the head, blood spatter along the baseboard, all within the 9-square-meter basement. Collier added gravity data, calculating 1.3 liters of blood loss at the scene, a volume impossible to fully conceal if the victim were still alive when removed, meaning death occurred there. Analysis of dust in the old wall plaster revealed paint particles containing microscopic human tissue, confirming back spatter when the bullet exited the skull and hit concrete. Reyes reviewed DNA results from blood and cloth samples, all matched Evelyn Langford. Once scattered data points now formed a chain. Shot fired at under 1 meter, female victim blood on basement wall, clean scene body removed. Everything matched what Keene suspected in 1959, but couldn't prove. Reyes ordered a final virtual model for presentation to the prosecutor's office, recreating the basement space, walls, and evidence positions using combined ballistic, blood, and DNA data. When run, the laser simulated the bullet passing through the victim's head and embedding in the wall, blood spattering in a fan shape, then fading to gray as paint was applied over it. Text appeared. Fired from 0.9 m, angle 30 degrees. Collier presented the synthesis. All physical evidence confirms the shot occurred inside the basement. Victim struck and died on site. Cleanup traces indicate evidence tampering, and body removal occurred within approximately 2 hours afterward. The official 18-page report, signed September 22, 2004, concluded succinctly, victim Langford, Evelyn, was shot and killed inside her residence at 214 Maple Drive. Scene consistent with homicide and post-event body removal. The state prosecutor's office received copies and updated the investigative file. Case 59M122 was no longer hypothesis, but a clearly defined homicide with established act, timing, mechanism, and location. When the lights in the simulation room went out, Reyes remained looking at an old photo of Harold Keene pinned beside the laser model. She understood those red light paths weren't just reconstructing a crime, they were restoring the truth her predecessor had sought for half a century. Evelyn Langford died beneath the paint that once hid everything, and 2004 science ensured it could never be concealed again. On October 1, 2004, after 3 months compiling all examination results, statements, and scene analysis, Oregon State Police completed the 247-page final investigative report. Case 59M122, authored by Detective Anna Reyes. The report was submitted to the state prosecutor's office, and Chief Roger Clemens signed approval the same day. The introduction summarized, based on forensic, testimonial, and documentary evidence collected between March-September 2004. It is the conclusion of Oregon State Police that Evelyn Langford was murdered inside her residence at 214 Maple Drive, Silverton, Oregon, on or about October 21, 1959. The perpetrator, Jack Langford. The report established the victim was killed by a single shot at 0.9 meters in the home basement using Jack Langford's registered Smith & Wesson .38 special. Blood, DNA, and ballistic evidence completely matched, and the scene showed chemical cleanup and erasure. Part 2 presented the direct evidentiary chain linking Jack Langford to the crime. The gun with registered serial 213784, bullet rifling match, basement blood DNA matching Evelyn Langford, and paint containing human tissue. It stated, scientific findings leave no reasonable doubt that homicide occurred within the Langford residence. Part 3. Post-crime conduct, clearly documented cover-up and file manipulation after the murder. Testimony from retired Officer Tom Halley, Dr. Audrey Finch's ink analysis, and documents provided by Michael Langford proved the original file was reopened and altered in 1962, 3 years after closure. The person directly responsible for manipulating records was identified as Sheriff Thomas Reeve, assisted by Deputy David Moore, under the pretext of protecting departmental honor. However, ink and typewriter evidence showed Sheriff Harold Keene's signature was forged to legitimize the no evidence of foul play conclusion. The report also noted Keene was likely forced to remain silent, as his 1959 handwritten notes completely contradicted the published official report. Part 5 addressed decades of concealment, including indirect involvement by Michael Langford. It stated, while no evidence suggests that Michael Langford participated in the homicide itself, testimonial admission indicates he intentionally destroyed archival materials related to Case 59-122 in 1986. Aware of their potential evidentiary value, this act violated Oregon Revised Statute 162.295, tampering with physical evidence. Additionally, Sheriff Reeve and Deputy Moore's interference, forgery and destruction of evidence constituted obstruction of justice under ORS 162.235. Reyes wrote in the conclusion, the death of Evelyn Langford resulted not only from an act of domestic homicide, but from an institutional failure perpetuated by law enforcement officers who altered and concealed the truth. The report clearly stated, Jack Langford was the sole perpetrator. Sheriff Thomas Reeve and Deputy David Moore bore primary responsibility for concealment and record alteration. Michael Langford, as heir to and subsequent destroyer of evidence, was subject to prosecution for destruction of evidence. The prosecutor's office was recommended to charge Reeve and Moore with obstruction of justice and forgery of public records, and to charge Michael Langford with destruction of evidence and failure to report truthfully. The report also recommended posthumous recognition of former Sheriff Harold Keene, acknowledging he was the only person in 1959 who opposed the false conclusion and tried to protect the truth. In the final assessment, Reyes wrote, this case illustrates a systemic breach of integrity within local law enforcement in the 1960s. Evidence demonstrates deliberate falsification of official records and suppression of physical evidence to protect an officer implicated in homicide. Though the primary perpetrator is deceased, justice requires acknowledgement of the truth and accountability of those who enabled concealment. The report was signed at 5:40 p.m. that day and stamped closed, findings submitted. Chief Clemens read silently to the last page, then signed approval with simple but weighty words, findings accepted. Proceed with prosecutorial review. After 45 years, the Evelyn Langford file, once closed with forged ink and silence, was now closed with the genuine seal of justice. On October 5, 2004, immediately after the Oregon District Attorney's Office approved the recommendations in the final investigative report, a formal arrest warrant for Michael Langford was issued under Oregon Revised Statute Section 162.295, the charge, destruction of evidence and obstruction of justice. The warrant, numbered 04-2279, was signed by a Marion County Circuit Court judge at 8:15 a.m. Because Michael was the sitting Silverton Chief of Police, execution of the warrant was handed over to the Oregon State Police Major Crimes Section to ensure complete independence. OSP Superintendent Roger Clemens personally directed the operation and issued an internal order. Absolutely no contact with Silverton police personnel until the arrest is complete. At 9:45 a.m., 3 OSP vehicles left Salem headed for Silverton. When the convoy reached the town police headquarters, officers were already positioned at all main entrances and the rear parking area. Reyes and the legal team entered, read the warrant aloud in the presence of the deputy chief and the administrative secretary. Michael Langford, in full uniform, rose from his desk. His face was ashen, but he showed no reaction. When Reyes finished reading the warrant, he said quietly, "I understand." Two OSP troopers stepped forward, removed his badge, collected his duty weapon, placed it in an evidence bag, and handcuffed him according to procedure. There was no resistance. Office staff stood silently. Some lowered their heads. No one spoke. Outside, word spread instantly. Local reporters gathered in front of the building in under 10 minutes. As Michael was escorted out the main door, camera flashes erupted. He did not cover his face. He kept his gaze straight ahead. One reporter shouted, "Do you have anything to say about the Evelyn Langford case?" He answered softly, "I want justice to be done for everyone." The short statement rang out in the crowd before being drowned by the sound of a news helicopter overhead. The convoy took a pre-planned route, avoiding main roads, and delivered Michael to the Marion County Jail by 12:10 p.m. Booking was complete. The transfer paperwork, signed by representatives of OSP and the jail superintendent, noted the detainee's condition as calm, cooperative, no injuries. At the same time, an Oregon State Police spokesperson held a brief press conference in Salem confirming the arrest in connection with the destruction of documents possessing evidentiary value in a 1959 homicide investigation. When asked whether additional prosecutions were being considered, the DA's representative said only, "The investigation remains active regarding individuals involved in altering records." Within hours, the news exploded statewide. Major papers like the Oregonian and the Salem Chronicle ran banner headlines. Silverton Police Chief Arrested, 1959 Cold Case Rocks Oregon. In Silverton itself, public reaction was sharply divided. Many older residents who had known Jack Langford were stunned, saying they couldn't believe the son, an exemplary officer, was arrested for covering up his father's crime. Younger residents, however, saw it as the town's chance to finally face the truth. Shops and cafes around the town square became venues for heated hours-long debates, some defending Michael, others furious. Reporters poured in, turning the quiet town of 8,000 into a media circus. The city council held an emergency session that afternoon, appointing Deputy Chief Harold Dunn as acting chief and releasing a statement. The Silverton Police Department will fully cooperate with the state and will maintain order and internal stability. Within 24 hours, footage of Michael Langford being walked out in handcuffs aired on virtually every evening newscast across Oregon. Television stations used titles like "A Legacy of Silence," "From Hero to Suspect," reopening a dark chapter the town had tried to forget. At the old Langford house on Maple Drive, now sealed, residents gathered to place flowers and candles at the gate. A small sign was erected that read simply, "For Evelyn." Back in Salem to file the arrest report, Reyes paused in the hallway to watch the news on a monitor showing Michael exiting headquarters in cuffs. The chyron read, "Oregon 1959 Cold Case. Arrest Shocks Community." She knew this was only the beginning of the justice this case still owed. In the report she submitted to the DA that evening, Reyes wrote, "Arrest warrant executed without resistance. Public reaction significant. Case continues to carry emotional and institutional impact beyond original homicide." For the first time in 45 years, Silverton had to confront the name it had once worn with pride, now forever linked to betrayal of the very badge he wore. On October 12, 2004, 1 week after Michael Langford's arrest, the Oregon District Attorney's Office began formal charging preparation. Under the direction of Chief Deputy District Attorney Ruth Callahan, a 6-member task force was formed to compile all evidence gathered during the 7-month investigation. The goal was to perfect charges of destruction of evidence and obstruction of justice under current law, while simultaneously strengthening the primary file on the 1959 homicide for presentation to a grand jury. On the 3rd floor of the DA's office in Salem, hundreds of pages of files were spread across tables, DNA results, ballistics reports, handwriting analysis documents, witness statements from Tom Halley, and Michael Langford's partial admission. Callahan demanded every piece of evidence be scrutinized for legal admissibility to eliminate any possible courtroom weakness. Reyes was responsible for organizing all forensic evidence, sequentially numbering items, and creating a timeline, a straight line stretching from October 1959 to September 2004, showing the crime and the cover-up. On the left side of the board, she listed milestones: crime, cleanup, record alteration, evidence destruction. On the right were the corresponding proofs: blood samples, ink composition, statements, recovered items. The very first line was written in red: Scene 214 Maple Drive, homicide confirmed. The legal team analyzed Michael's statements, confirming that his admission of destroying documents in the evidence warehouse in 1986 satisfied every element of tampering with physical evidence because he was fully aware of their legal value. Likewise, his nearly two-decade failure to report known record tampering was classified as obstruction of justice through omission. At the October 14th meeting, Callahan heard Reyes's briefing on the correlation between the basement evidence and Michael's statements. Reyes explained, the items recovered in 2004, cloth, with the victim's DNA, bracelet engraved ELL, whiskey bottle bearing fingerprints, all confirm the crime scene was inside the Langford home. The blood matches Evelyn's relative's DNA profile, 100%. It is irrefutable. She emphasized that destroying photographs and files had delayed justice for 45 years and prolonged the victim's family's suffering, and therefore must be treated with utmost seriousness. The crime lab submitted its final ballistics report. The Smith & Wesson revolver serial number 2-13784 matched the bullet recovered from the basement wall, fired at a 30-degree downward angle. The 42-page summary included trajectory diagrams, lumino photographs, and paint solvent analysis. Everything was numbered and labeled Exhibit Series A. Tom Halley's statements became Exhibit Series B, including audio recordings, photographs, and the 1960 internal photo transfer form bearing Halley's signature. Exhibit Series C contained ink aging documents proving Sheriff Keene's signature had been forged in 1962. Finally, Exhibit Series D consisted of Michael Langford's admission that he destroyed an entire box of archived materials. All were sealed in a single evidence box, labeled State of Oregon v. Michael Langford, Evidence Compilation 2004. Over the following days, the prosecution team finalized the draft indictment. The opening paragraph read, "The State of Oregon hereby charges that Michael Langford, being aware that official records and photographic evidence of a homicide investigation possessed evidentiary value, did knowingly destroy said materials, thereby obstructing the due course of justice." Callahan reviewed every line, tightening legal language while keeping it clear for a jury. On October 18th, the complete file was delivered to Marion County Circuit Court to schedule the preliminary hearing. The same day, the DA's office issued a press release confirming that Oregon State Police and the District Attorney's Office have completed charging documents related to the concealment and destruction of evidence in the Evelyn Langford case. Media outlets immediately ran stories: Silverton cold case, evidence tampering charges filed against sheriff's son. Public opinion in Silverton remained divided, but support for justice was clearly growing. Evelyn's surviving relatives, now only a niece living in Eugene, sent a letter thanking OSP. "My aunt has finally been given her voice back after 45 years. On the evening of October 20th, Reyes completed her final 28-page summary, attaching the full chain of DNA, ballistics, and statement evidence, and signed it, submitted to the state prosecutor for trial preparation. In the dimly lit room, she looked one last time at the black and white photograph of Evelyn Langford before sliding it into the hard case. Knowing that after months of pursuit, the truth finally had an official place, no longer a secret buried in a basement, but a formal prosecution file bearing the seal of modern justice. On November 15, 2004, Marion County Circuit Court opened the trial of State of Oregon v. Michael Langford after nearly 2 months of preparation. Courtroom 3 was packed. Media from across the state and beyond filled the seats. Chief Deputy DA Ruth Callahan personally prosecuted. Detective Anna Reyes sat in the front row representing Oregon State Police. Defendant Michael Langford was brought in wearing a dark suit, no longer bearing a badge, looking gaunt after more than a month in custody. When Judge Charles Henningsen gavelled the session to order, the room fell completely silent. Callahan began with a summary of the indictment. For more than 4 decades, the Evelyn Langford murder was buried in silence. Today, this court is not judging the act of killing, because the killer is dead, but the actions of those who delayed justice. She presented each evidence group from the prosecution file, DNA from the Langford basement, matching the victim, ballistics, proving the shot was fired inside the house, ink analysis proving records were forged in 1962, and former officer Tom Halley's testimony confirming crime scene photographs were destroyed. Each item was projected on a large screen for the jury of 8 women and 4 men. Reyes's investigative statement was then read into the record, recounting the entire case revival from the 6 missing photographs to the exhumation at Silver Creek Dam. She took the stand and answered the prosecutor's questions calmly, citing details with accompanying images, glowing luminol stains, blood-stained cloth, the EL bracelet, the bullet in the wall, and the 30-degree trajectory report. When Callahan asked, "Based on your investigation, where was the actual crime scene?" Reyes answered firmly, "The basement of 214 Maple Drive, Silverton, where we recovered the victim's blood." The response rang out. The courtroom went still. The prosecution then turned to Michael Langford's conduct. Callahan read excerpts from his statement. "I destroyed a box of documents that might relate to the case, including crime scene photos and internal paperwork. I did it to protect my father's reputation." She stressed that the defendant, as a sworn law enforcement officer, fully understood the criminal nature of his actions. No one has the right to decide for themselves what belongs in the history of justice. Defense attorney Edward Klein argued that Michael's actions stemmed from a mistaken belief, not intent to conceal a crime, but to protect family memory, and that the defendant voluntarily confessed and cooperated, actually helping to solve the case. Klein asked the court to consider mitigating factors: 25 years of exemplary police service, no prior record, and genuine cooperation. During cross-examination, the prosecution introduced evidence of the destruction, 1986 evidence logs, bearing the signature M. Langford, and confirmation from the warehouse technician that Michael personally carried documents to the incinerator. When Reyes was recalled, she testified, "The missing records correspond exactly to the period when he managed the evidence warehouse." The jury took notes in silence. On the afternoon of the second day, the defendant took the stand. Michael's voice was hoarse. "I don't deny what I did. I thought I was protecting my father, but in reality, I betrayed everyone, including him." He paused, then continued, "I want to accept responsibility, because justice should have happened long ago." The courtroom felt heavy. Many Silverton residents in the gallery lowered their heads. After final arguments from both sides, Judge Henningsen sent the jury to deliberate. After 3 hours, at 5:25 p.m. on November 17th, they returned. The foreperson stood and announced, "We, the jury, unanimously find the defendant Michael Langford guilty of tampering with physical evidence and obstruction of justice." The room was silent, except for the soft tapping of the clerk's keyboard. Judge Henningsen pronounced sentence, taking into account the defendant's voluntary confession, cooperation with the investigation, and long public service. The court sentences the defendant to 10 years imprisonment, as provided by law, ineligible for parole during the first year, and permanent revocation of the right to work in law enforcement. When the sentence was read, Michael stood motionless. Reyes glanced over and saw him give a slight nod, as if accepting what he had avoided for nearly half his life. The verdict was released to the public that same evening, accompanied by a DA statement. Today's trial closes the final chapter of the Evelyn Langford case, an example that justice, though delayed, can still be found. Headlines the next day read, "Sheriff's son sentenced. Justice after 45 years." In Silverton, residents gathered outside City Hall. Many cried, some held signs reading, "Justice for Evelyn." In the now empty courtroom, Reyes gathered her thick case files and looked once more at the spot where the defendant had stood. She wrote the final line in her notebook, "Verdict delivered. Justice recorded." After 45 years, the once dusted-over case finally had a real verdict, not only for the man on trial, but for an entire town that had once chosen silence over truth. On November 22, 2004, 5 days after the trial concluded, and the sentence was handed down, the Oregon State Police held an official press conference at their Salem headquarters to announce the full results of the investigation into Case 59M122, Evelyn Langford Homicide, 1959. The large ground-floor conference room was packed with reporters, and television cameras lined up in rows. At the front of the room, a large sign read, "Oregon State Police, Cold Case Division, Resolution Report." Chief Roger Clemens opened the press conference in a calm, steady voice. "Today, after 45 years, we confirm that the 1959 disappearance of Evelyn Langford in Silverton, Oregon, was a homicide. The perpetrator has been identified as Jack Langford, the victim's husband, and a former Silverton police officer who died in 1978. He paused, looked around the silent room, and continued, "Thanks to advances in forensic technology and the perseverance of the investigative team, justice has finally been served." He introduced Detective Anna Reyes, who had led the entire reinvestigation, along with the forensic team. Reyes stepped up to the podium and opened the slide presentation. On the screen appeared a series of images, the 1959 case file, the basement floor plan, DNA test results, and a 3D crime scene reconstruction. She said, "We reopened the case in March 2004 after discovering misplaced evidence. Through DNA analysis, ballistics, and blood spatter modeling, the team determined the victim was shot once at a distance of 0.9 meters in the basement of her own home. The bullet, the gun, and the blood samples all matched perfectly. That is, the scientific foundation confirming this was a homicide, not a voluntary disappearance." On the screen, enlarged images of the glowing luminol reaction and the rusted Smith & Wesson revolver made a strong impression. Reyes emphasized, "Next-generation DNA technology and blood spatter modeling enabled us to recover what the 1959 investigation could not prove. The rest of the story is the truth that was concealed by people in positions of power at the time." Next, Chief Clemens announced the list of individuals involved in concealing and tampering with records: Sheriff Thomas Reeve, Deputy David Moore, and Michael Langford, who had just been sentenced to 10 years in prison for destruction of evidence. He stated firmly, "This investigation not only resolved a criminal case, but also reaffirmed the principle that no one, not even within law enforcement, is above the law." A 68-page summary report was distributed to all media, opening with the line, "Victim Evelyn Langford. Offender, Jack Langford. Case resolved through forensic analysis and DNA identification, 2004. The report detailed the investigative process from the discovery of 6 missing photographs, ink analysis, proving records were altered in 1962, the exhumation of remains at Silver Creek Dam, to the DNA match of the victim and physical evidence. The conclusion stated clearly, the Langford case exemplifies the power of modern forensic science to overcome the failures of human honesty. Without the recovery of lost photographs, basement DNA, and ballistic evidence, justice would have remained silent. When reporters asked about the possibility of prosecuting other individuals, Chief Prosecutor Ruth Callahan replied, "Those directly involved in falsifying and concealing evidence have passed away. But this file will be kept as precedent to ensure that no suspended case is ever truly closed until the truth is proven." On the screen appeared a photograph of Evelyn's remains beside Silver Creek, captioned, "Recovered July 204. Identified by dental and DNA match." Many in the room bowed their heads as a short video of the recovery site played, the damp mud, the rusted gun, and the temporary wooden marker reading E.L. that the team had placed on the day of exhumation. Reyes concluded her presentation with a brief statement. Mrs. Evelyn Langford, after 45 years, has finally been returned to her true name. No longer a missing person file, but an identified victim of a crime. As the press conference ended, media outlets simultaneously ran the headline, Oregon cold case closed after 45 years. DNA solves 1959 murder. That evening, the CBS National News replayed excerpts from the press conference, showing Reyes carrying the thick case file as she left the room, with the chyron scrolling beneath, Justice for Evelyn Langford, 1959-2004. In her small office in Salem, Reyes sat alone and placed the final report on her desk. The desk lamp reflected the words "Case solved." She gently closed the folder, knowing the case was closed, not in silence, but with irrefutable evidence of science and truth. On November 28, 2004, nearly a week after the press conference announcing the investigation results, the Oregon State Police officially signed the order to close the Evelyn Langford case file. An internal notice titled Case File 59M122. Status solved was issued at 9 a.m., confirming that all investigative, prosecutorial, and trial procedures were complete. In the state's electronic archive system, the case code changed from unresolved missing person to homicide, solved. A simple yet weighty line read, Case closed after 45 years. Detective Anna Reyes was present at the Central Evidence Vault in Salem to oversee the final step, sealing and permanently archiving all related physical evidence. On the long table sat aluminum boxes labeled ELL, Evidence Archive, the Smith & Wesson .38 revolver, the bullet recovered from the wall, blood-soaked fabric scraps, a silver bracelet, engraved EL, wall plaster samples, and the restored old Polaroid photos. Reyes inspected each evidence bag, signed the sealing manifest, and placed them into locker 47 in the cold case resolved section. When the metal door shut, the sound echoed softly in the cold room, closing nearly half a century of controversy, suspicion, and silence. On her desk, the original 1959 paper file, notebooks, Sheriff Harold Keene's reports, and copies of forensic documents was placed in a new leather binder marked Historical Record, Restricted Access. The final index contained 8 sections. 1. Crime Scene, 1,959 halves. Evidence List 3. Alterations, 1,962 quarters. Recovery, 2,004 fifths. Forensic Analysis, 6. Testimonies, 7. Trial, 8. Closure. At the end was Reyes's handwritten note, filed and preserved under OSP Directive, Permanent Retention. In the hallway, technicians removed the temporary sign, Active Investigation Zone, from the door of Room 3C, and replaced it with a new one. Archive. Access by authorization only. That afternoon, a brief closing meeting was held in Chief Roger Clemens's office. He thanked the entire team and noted that this was the oldest case in Oregon state history to be solved through the combination of DNA technology, crime scene reconstruction, and document recovery. He said, from an old file, 6 missing photographs, and an erased line of text, you reconstructed the truth. That proves time cannot erase evidence, only people can do that, and people can also restore it. Reyes remained silent, her gaze fixed on the black and white photo of Evelyn Langford hanging on the bulletin board. The woman with the gentle smile she had pursued for 9 months of investigation. After the meeting, she returned to the records room and wrote the final entry in her duty log. Case 59M122 officially closed. All evidence preserved, justice served. The late-day light streamed through the window, illuminating the words she had just written and reflecting off the dark brown case folder. She gently set down her pen, removed her badge from her chest, and looked at the row of sealed metal cabinets. In that archive, the Langford case was no longer a haunting mystery, but proof that a truth, even buried for 45 years, can still rise from the darkness and be permanently recorded in real ink rather than forged lines. The Oregon State Police closed the file and ended the investigation, and at the same time restored honor to Evelyn Langford, who was finally recorded under her true name in the ledger of justice. The story of the Evelyn Langford case is not only the tragedy of a woman murdered in silence, it is also a mirror reflecting how power, reputation, and fear can distort justice in American society, both in the past and in the present. In 1959, a police officer killed his wife in their basement, and an entire system, from Sheriff Reeve to his subordinates, worked together to cover up the crime to protect the reputation of the department. It took 45 years, DNA technology, forensic science, and the perseverance of people like Detective Anna Reyes for the truth to be reconstructed. This story reminds us that justice in the United States may be delayed, but it cannot be buried forever. In today's context, when issues of transparency, accountability, and public trust in law enforcement are still widely debated, the Langford case serves as a warning that no organization, not even the police, is allowed to place internal honor above the truth. From Michael Langford's act of concealment to Reyes's determination to restore destroyed records, we see two extremes, one side driven by fear of losing the past, the other by the courage to confront it. The lesson is that integrity lies not only in following the law, but also in having the courage to admit mistakes, even late. In American society today, that means every citizen and every public servant must understand that justice only truly exists when the truth is protected, even if it means facing the very system one belongs to. Transparency, however painful, is always the only foundation for maintaining trust and public ethics in a democracy. Thank you for following to the end of the journey to restore justice for Evelyn Langford, proof that the truth can be buried, but it never disappears. Please subscribe to the channel to continue joining us in the next true crime stories, where justice always finds its way back, even if it takes a lifetime.